Yep, we got everybody.
All right, great. So with that, I call the Snoqualmie City Council Roundtable to order and turn it over to Rob to go ahead and cue up the conversation. Robert.
Okay, so tonight we get into the discussion on options, and I'm going to go through these charts very slowly and share with you our assumptions again and some of the disclaimers on these charts and where some of the numbers did change from past presentations, and I'm going to call them out here. And so this is the updated forecast with the COVID impact. Now, one disclaimer is you can see the note below. You're going to see this. This is the chart that we presented as far as the pre-COVID numbers back in early March at Roundtable number 2. And I do apologize because the last presentation we had added $300 to the expenditure, $300,000 for the expenditure line for 2020 for pre-COVID based on some utility bills that came out. I know that confused some people, so I apologize. We eliminated that from the forecast. So what you're seeing are the lines that we presented to you as our pre-COVID forecast back at Roundtable number 2 in mid-March. So that's the orange line for expenditures pre-COVID, blue line for revenues pre-COVID. Now that darker dashed line below, that's the forecasted revenues as of 5/22. And I'm going to go in a couple options, and so you're going to see some different scenarios here, and then we're going to just have the discussion on those scenarios. So this is just a baseline, and this forecast here assumes no recovery on COVID. So we're saying, okay, if COVID is really a quote unquote recession that follows normal patterns like we've talked about in previous roundtables, it's about 1.5 years worth of downturn and a slow recovery based on that if it's a typical recession. Now, that's not what we're not assuming that per se. This is just the baseline stripped down forecast in the beginning here. So again, dropping revenues forecasted at 17.1 for 2020, going into 17.6 for 2021. So you can see that drop there. So that's what we're talking about when we start this presentation here. Any questions on this chart? This should match the charts that we've shown previously. And again, the only difference is we went back and we made sure that the pre-COVID lines matched Roundtable number 2 in early March. You can see Council Toolbox. Again, the mayor has described this. You have level of service on one side, economic development is another option, raise taxes and fees is another option. The no actions is the utopia in the center. And we're going to talk about some of the economic development options and the taxes and fees. We're going to show those slides again tonight. Do you want to add anything on this, Mayor?
Oh, go ahead, Robert.
So again, I did want to show the impact of the 1%. This is cumulative. So this is if the council decided not to take the bank capacity, approximately 152,000, which would be bank capacity plus a 1% increase for 2021, and then 1% each year afterward. This is based on no new development, no new increases in utility value, just status quo. Again, it's about 152,000 the first year, adds a little over 80,000 for each additional year, and you can see the cumulative impact going to 2026 on this chart. So again, that's cumulative impact each year. That's assuming the council doesn't take the 1% through that period. Do you want to add anything, Mayor?
No, please just go ahead, Robert.
So the next change here, this is the forecast with the COVID recovery. So again, what we're showing is if we were to close the gap within the next biennium on COVID, we know there's going to be some lasting impacts into 21. We're not sure how long. We are anticipating a recovery happening in second quarter, third quarter of 21. But we're saying, okay, even if we had a full force recession coming out of this, even if it was a worst case scenario, we would either have, reserves that would replenish those funds that dropped, or if we had an improved fiscal outlook and we didn't quite hit that bottom, this is what it would look like if we came back to 22. I hope this makes sense. If we dropped for 20 and 21, And then 22, we're back at that revenue forecast we originally had before COVID. This is what it would look like. And again, you still see the original gap between revenues and expenses that we talked about before the COVID situation happened. Again, just that structural gap if expenditures just continued as is and revenues continued as is with no new development, no new taxes, no new enhancements, just status quo. And again, that's just a baseline forecast. It's just a status quo forecast going forward. And so here's a change here. We wanted to show this chart without the COVID recovery. So again, what would it look like if there was no COVID recovery? What would revenues and expenditures look like? And again, you can see a more precipitous change here. If you remember that first chart that I showed where it was just revenues and expenditures, here's the new revenue forecast, assuming that there's no recovery, no quick recovery, no improved fiscal outlook, and or no reserves being used. What would those revenues look like year over year going forward in the future? And you can see that that line never catches back up. Absent anything else, again, this is no new development, no taxes, no different options, not even the 1%. This is just baseline. If there was a quote unquote normal recession and a slower recovery coming out of it, this is what the revenue line would look like. You can see it drops below, never reaches that revenue line before. And you can see that gap in 26 of 22.5 in expenditures, 20 million on revenues, if that were to happen. But again, that's assuming no council action on anything. So that's just kind of the worst case scenario. If there was no decisions and the economy was slow to recover, this is what the chart would look like.
Robert, Councilmember Sunwall has a question. Did you want to take questions as you go along?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So I don't even know what without COVID recovery means. Does that mean no one ever goes back to school again and we're all stuck in our homes? I don't understand what no recovery, COVID recovery means.
It means we're not replenishing the revenues we lost during the downturn. So this is assuming, say we get to 21, again, we're forecasting a recovery starting in the second half of 21. That could happen sooner, could happen later. This is just assuming that this is a quote unquote typical recession. So not like 2008, but like 2001, 2000, 2003, there was a little bit of a downturn in the economy, kind of like what a typical recession over the past 25 years would look like. Again, you might remember this discussion on the retreat. So we were saying pretty much what 16 months of negative quarters would look like, or negative revenues would look like going forward, and you're dropping the base. This is assuming that there's nothing to boost the revenues back to where they were.
Okay, so this is if we never make up for it, essentially.
Right, if it's a slower growth coming out. So if it's, like, for example, a lot of cities were only growing 2 to 3% each year out of the recession. For 2008, granted, that was a very significant recession. We're hoping this one is more shallow, of course. But this is your worst case on an average recession for the city. You just don't hit that base again on revenues. But this is not closing anything. This is not doing anything. Mayor?
Councilmember Ross?
So this is the same exact slide as the first one you showed us,
It is, yes.
right? Okay, you showed, okay, so it's not any different.
No.
Thank you.
So Robert, if I could clarify too, so I make sure I understand it. And maybe to put it in terms that Councilmember Sunwall would understand, it's kind of like running a 5K race and you have one runner who's called expenses and the other's revenues, and they start out running the same pace, but then revenue stops for a while expenses keeps going down the road, and there's a gap that opens up between them. Eventually revenue starts running again. But if it's kind of gets back to where it was before, there's always going to be that gap, and it never quite catches up unless he can run faster than what he did before. So if you look at this chart, for example, the revenues sort of catch up, but rather than being where they were originally at, say, $18.3 million in 2021, it doesn't get back to that range of $18.4 million until 2023. So it's basically kind of shifted forward, but that gap always remains. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, exactly. And the business mix, again, is part of this too. So you have a lot of cities out there that they'll have an auto dealership. So they'll actually have a steeper slide in the first year of this recession than we do. Like, for example, Issaquah, Tukwila, some others in the community where they're dropping well below what we're dropping for our sales tax projections. So they'll be faster to come out of it because, you'll have an auto sales drop 30% one year and then increase 30% another year over 2 years. We don't have those kinds of ups and downs. So just based on what our revenue mix is, between the utility tax, sales tax, property tax. Again, property tax not growing under this scenario. So that's flat already. So you're not getting any growth. So you're dependent on the growth of the other tax revenues, utility tax, B&O, sales tax. And again, we don't have a lot of, areas where we would boost it up per se by itself. So that's what this is showing. I hope that makes sense.
Just as a reminder, because I'd have to toggle between, I only see 7 videos at a time. I have to toggle between. It's very helpful if you use the raise hand on the panelist, or on the participant panel. Councilor Mayhew has.
Yeah, so this is not consistent with my understanding of recession. So I'm really, and I just can't come up with a way to understand this to be, property, just trying to process what you're saying. So are we saying that our restaurants 5 years later are not getting people in them? I don't understand the notion that we never get caught up. I'm trying to figure out what in the city is there that never catches up.
Okay, so Councilmember Mayhew, or Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry. So what this is showing again is the gloom and doom type scenario. We hope we don't approach that. We hope it doesn't exist. But what it's showing is if you had a recession, and a lot of cities did experience this after 2008, so it's out there. I mean, there's a fact that this happens in places where you're not going to see, if you see a 20% drop in sales tax one year, you're not going to see a 20% increase the second year. That's all this is saying. This is saying that your revenues are not going to, like the mayor said, they're not going to catch up in a marathon under this scenario. Now, they very well could, and we're going to show the scenario where they do. But this is assuming you've got a slower recovery coming out of the recession. And there's nothing out there that's going to be 25% higher in 2 years than it is now. That's what this is showing.
Okay, so maybe the way I should understand what you're trying to say is, the slide you showed us before had the dotted line kind of going down and then coming back within, I think you had it within 2 years.
Yeah, we're going to show
sort of another way to think about it is it takes much longer than 2 years. Maybe we don't need to belabor whether in 2026 it actually would have caught back up, or the point you're saying is something that stays lower longer. Is that maybe you're not necessarily trying to sell us on 2026, the 20.0 number. You're just trying to sell us on the idea that it may not catch up as quickly as on the prior slide, and you want us to think about that. Is that it?
Right, slower recovery of revenues in the out years.
Okay, all right, got it.
But again, this is the worst case scenario, so everybody knows this is not accepted what we're going to do. This is just the worst case scenario that's out there. So I just want to make that disclaimer.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find my raised hand. Actually, it's not the worst case scenario. It's a crummy case scenario, but worst case could even be worse, couldn't it?
Possibly.
Okay.
One would hope not. We're trying to think
Well,
possibly.
we hope not, but I just say that because I think you're trying to tune us into the idea that we don't know, but here's kind of the different kind of things. And I would say, let's not kid ourselves that that's the worst case scenario. It isn't.
Yes.
Councilor Summerall and Councilor Ross.
I think what Jim's getting at is the worst case scenario is we're in the exact same spot 10, 12 months from now, right? With no vaccine, lots of fear, and a shutdown economy again. So,
And a spike in infection rates.
right. So anyway, carry on.
Councilor Ross and Rick.
So if you look at without COVID recovery, the percentage increase is a little over 2% or under 3%, right? The 17.9 to 18.4, for instance. If you look at with COVID recovery, you're jumping like 6% from 2021 to 2022. You don't show that huge increase anywhere else. So that can't be realistic, because if we didn't have the COVID, if you took the dotted line out of with COVID recovery in that one chart, that would still from 18.3 to 18.7 still be around 2%. So really the one chart that shows with COVID recovery really isn't realistic because there's no way we're going to jump 6% when on average we're increasing only a little over 2%.
This chart was showing a couple things. One, it was showing, you know, if there was some backfill, but also an improved fiscal outlook. So that would include the out years. So if you're coming out, instead of coming out as a turtle, like the second chart, you're coming out more as a road runner, for lack of a better term, coming
A
a
hair.
faster, like a boost, like the V-shaped recovery where you've got more sustained momentum coming out of it. But again, it could happen and it could not happen. There's a lot of uncertainty out there.
It just seemed like 6% was almost unrealistic compared to all of your previous projections and every other chart.
This is higher. This is more aggressive, yes. Well, as far as the 21 to 20, yes. But the 25, I mean, that same forecast here in the pre-COVID, that just catches up to the pre-COVID. So this is just being more aggressive, getting back up to where we were. But that could be a combination of the fiscal outlook plus, again, plus using reserves.
Rick, you wanted to say something, then Sean, I don't know if you're leaving your hand up or if you had another question, and then Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you, Robert. I think you basically talked about and answered the question, like Mayor Pro Tem had said, and Councilmember Sunwall, and what we're talking about. Yeah, the worst case scenario, obviously, it could be worse, right? So if we get another helping of this, December, January, February of the end of this year and into next year, it could be an interesting time and what that graph will look like. So we're hopeful, and that, like I say, vaccines and medicine helps kind of stabilize this. So like you said, we've talked about it before, but yeah, it could be a lot worse, but we're hopeful at this point. So thank you.
Councilmember May.
Yeah, I would just say, actually, today, the stock market, the S&P 500 hit an all-time high in all of history. So that's because a lot of smart money thinks we actually will recover. Now, the stock market's all over the place. So there is by no means unanimous agreement on this, but I think the idea that this is, a 6% recovery is just out of the question. I don't think that's true. And the only reason I make this point is I think we're all operating in a lot of uncertainty. And I think, the mayor made this point in his State of the Cities address. These kind of things are very fluid. They're changing almost weekly. But I think the reason I think it's really important for us to kind of have a sense of the range and kind of sort of zero in our minds on this is I don't want us to sort of see some news 2 months from now and suddenly kind of feel like, well, we got to revisit everything because we never thought it might recover. I think we want to sort of build in, okay, it could. And by the way, this slide tells me even in this scenario, we got a heck of a problems. We got problems to deal with, but it could be worse. And I just think we want to try and settle in my opinion, on something that's going to take us through a biennial budgeting process where we're not kind of bouncing around, where we actually kind of manage to zero in and kind of make kind of some smart decisions, the smartest we can come up with, knowing that it could be a little better, could be worse, and we just need to make smart decisions within that range. So yeah, I would just say it's not out of the question. It's just, yeah.
Councilmember Lissay, then Councilmember.
I appreciate what Councilmember Mayhew said there, because I think while we want to forecast long term and we want to look long term, right now we're in an unprecedented point. I mean, we talk about trying to equate this to is there a recession or a past downturn? Well, we can't compare this to anything else unless we go back to 1918. And then it's even not a comparison because we're completely different than we were 102 years ago. I would like you know, we've gone through a lot of these slides. I think we've had now 6 sessions reviewing everything. We keep talking about these forecasts, but until we start talking about where we're headed with addressing the differences between revenue and expenditures, we're going to go through more and more of these sessions having the same conversations over and over again. I'm just trying to get to the point that we keep having these presentations. We need to start having, take the gloves off, get our hands dirty, start talking about how we're going to solve these issues. Otherwise, we're going to get to October and be staring at the end of the year and not have it planned out. So that's just my 2 cents. I want to keep going through this, but if we keep having these same conversations over and over again about not knowing what the forecast is or not knowing what it is, we're never going to get to actually solving the issue at hand, which is resolving ourselves dealing with revenue and expenditure.
I think that's a good segue to the rest of the meeting, but I'll go to Councilmember Sunwell real quick. Councilmember Sunwell, I don't know if you're muted.
Sorry, it's what Councilmember Lissay said. This isn't a knock on the presentations. It's becoming death by presentation, and now we need death by conversation. And so I think either way we all die. Sorry, but I think that is a great segue. I don't know how much is left in these decks, but we do need to start talking about what we're going to do, because we are guessing, and these seem like great guesses, right? And at the end of the day, like, there's been a lot of great guesses over the last 3 months and some not so great guesses. At some point, we just got to do. So I'm done.
So Robert, if I could add before you move into these next scenarios, there's sort of two fundamentally what are somewhat different challenges that are facing us. One is the immediate one, and one is sort of the next year, 2, 3, 4 years. The immediate one is what changed after post-COVID is that we suddenly are facing a significant deficit in 2020. This year, before the end of the year, there's not many conversations that we can dawdle around for the next couple of months trying to figure out what to do with that. So the importance of these 2 slides, when you kind of toggle back and forth between the fast COVID recovery versus the long one, is this one, for example, tells you, and as we get into other scenarios, well, we don't need to panic. We don't need to necessarily gouge and suddenly slash expenses and costs, because we have adequate reserves to fill in much of that gap in the initial year or the remainder of this year, and maybe into part of next year, and then buy ourselves some time to have that recovery along with other strategies bring more revenue and to close that gap. On the other hand, if you go to the slow recovery where everything's staying pretty flat and there is a pretty wide margin there, I think you see as we get to a lot of the solutions, there isn't a ready solution that would close it entirely without cutting expenses. So you'd say, heck, don't touch the reserves at all. We got to start making significant cuts now, just like Issaquah and some other communities. So because of the unpredictability of the future, what we're going to be recommending to you, and again, to kind of cut to the chase, is we've already been doing a lot of internal looking and feel that we can cut probably $400,000 to $500,000 out of 2020's budget without really doing much damage to the fundamental levels of service or staffing levels. And so what that means is, hey, rather than doing all reserves or all expense cuts, do a hybrid in between because of the unpredictability. And so half of that is kind of trimmed from cost cuts and the rest from reserves. And then it gives us a little more time or several more months then to continue looking at projections and where the future is taking us. So with that, I'll let Robert jump into that next slide.
And to the mayor's point, you could see that we did estimate that in 2020, because of service level decreases due to COVID and the work from home and some of our costs going down for just this year only. So we've seen that one-time drop this year to 18.1 instead of $18.4 million on the forecast. We have it back to quote unquote normal without any service level changes. Just what would 21 be based on our forecast before? 18.5 million. But again, to the mayor's point, you can see where you could lower the curve a little bit. But this chart here, again, we're showing you 2 scenarios. This is the full recovery of COVID going, strong recovery V-shaped recovery in the next biennium. But you still have that hole you're going to have to plug in the out years even so, even if you. But
Councilmember Holloway?
sorry.
I'm sorry, were you finished, Robert? I was going to, Councilmember Holloway had a question.
Yeah, right.
So you've characterized the savings you put in place now as all non-recurring, one-time non-recurring. None of those savings can be baked into the solution moving forward?
At this point, for this current year, this is assuming no. But again, we're talking internally about what we can do, as the mayor said, going forward. What can we maximize to flatten that curve out? So there are some things of that we're looking at long term. Yes. The answer is yes. We're looking at that right now.
Okay.
You
I
just
mean,
haven't
some
put
would
that
not,
in yet.
Councilmember Holloway, some would not be sustainable. We think they're, for example, this year would be a tough deal, but we'd have to do some negotiations with the collective bargaining agreements to see if they'd be amenable to say, free salaries or, cut the rest of training budgets for the remainder of the year. And other strat. I know I'm missing it, forgetting a few right now, but some of which aren't sustainable. We can't keep, for example, compensation and colas flat forever. But what it does do, kind of to my analogy about the racer, is it does slow down the expense guy on the racetrack to where when revenues picks up, revenue can catch up to the guy. So even if it's a temporary one, it allows that gap to sort of lessen on a more permanent basis, or the gap between the two to lessen.
Right. I have no expectation that this would be a 100% reduction moving forward, but that some portion of it maybe we could look at keeping in place and bringing that curve in the out years down, not much, but a notch. But yeah, you guys need sharpen your pencils, take a look, see what makes sense.
Continue, Robert, please.
Yeah, and then again, this is what we said, that worst case scenario where you have that slower recovery. You can see where that gap does widen going out in future years. And so I'm going to give this to the mayor to discuss. So what this chart shows is just a scenario, one of the scenarios we've discussed here. This would show, theoretically, if you had two levee lifts, for one for approximately a little under $500,000, that would be theoretically voter approved in 21, one for the same amount in 25, what it would look like. And again, we did that with also embedding in the 1% property tax increases each year. Mayor, did you want to take this slide?
Well, I just want you to clarify what so right now you're just showing scenarios if it was all out of one bucket, out of the taxes and fees bucket, correct?
This would be the lid lift bucket, so to speak. So this is just looking at what a lid lift impact would do. And again, there was a public safety levy a few years ago. This would be double the amount of that levy approximately. So again, about just under 500,000 a year based on current property tax and property assessed value, about 500,000 a year generated, just under $1 million a year. If you double that, or passed an equivalent one in 2025, what that would do to the line. So again, you're boosting the line up more towards that expenditure line. You're not quite hitting that though.
I just want to clarify for the council. So what you're seeing here, the tools that are being used out of your toolbox, this slide is only showing an effect on that dashed dark blue line from tools used out of the taxes and fees bucket, from 2 levy lid lifts and a 1% property. That's if the council says, hey, we're going to commit to doing 1% property taxes for the next few years, and we're going to commit to a levy lid lift. That's assuming the voters approve it. And I hope you understand that the levy lid lift is about if our overall operational costs are growing at in excess of 3% per year, even if with the 1%, you're having an erosion of 2% per year of inflationary costs. Just to maintain existing levels of service, that's compounding costs every year, and you're falling behind to the tune of $160,000 a year, which compounds on top of that every subsequent year. So to make up for that, every 3-year cycle, you got to put a levy lid lift out there with an amount that helps make up for that other 2%. and then you fall behind, and then you do another levy lift to make it. So it's basically a way of going out to the voters to say, hey, can you provide us the revenue to keep up with inflation, to keep up with the status quo, to keep up with just providing the same levels of service? Councilor Jeans and then Councilor Mayhew.
Since we're looking at toolboxes and we're on the taxless toolbox, and we said no to 1% this last year, that gives us the option to do more than 1% the next time we have the opportunity to do it. And what's that percentage, or how much can we gain by doing more than 1%?
Councilmember Jeans, I've estimated approximately $150,000. It would have been about 83 to 85,000 without it, so about 150. So just under 2 times.
So Robert, let me ask you, in this scenario that you're showing one here, including a 1% property tax, are you including grabbing back that banked amount?
Correct. I'm actually including everything that I showed on slide, I think it was slide 3, the property tax slide. I'm including those amounts on that slide. So I'm building, instead of that loss, I'm building that into the base here.
Yeah, so Councilmember Jeans, what Robert is saying is the bank capacity plus the 1% is in that dash line that you're seeing right there.
Okay.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because I think you said it the way this looks to me like it's working, which is, it looks like under this scenario, there'd be a levy lift that would presumably, that would go out to the voters in 21, therefore take effect in 22. And then it would be 3 years later in 2024, it would go out to the voters again to take effect in 2025. So it's an every 3-year cycle, which is what you said, Mayor. That's, I think, what this is showing. Am I right?
It's 4, sorry.
Well, how would
this is actually showing a 4-year cycle.
5? So if it's every 4, I don't understand how the numbers move like that then.
Well, it goes
Looks
from
like you're bumping in 25 and 22, which is 3 years.
2022. Then it goes up to 2026. You can see that 5. I'm sorry. Hold on a second.
I think just your label's wrong. I think the way you did it was the way the mayor said it.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's what I thought. Okay.
Sorry.
I guess if I can just jump on top of that real fast, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm not following how it can jump, 1.5 million from in 22 with a 1%, but doesn't jump similarly in 2025. It's only jumping 1 million. What's the difference? If it's 1%, why is the 1% lower in 2025 than it is in 2021?
It's not just the 1%. So what that's also, Councilmember Lasse, that's also showing that recovery line. So when we talked about before that full recovery, that's embedded into that number jumping from 21 to 22. It's not just the lid lift, it's the recovery from the COVID. So that's reaching, that would be reaching where we were plus the lid lift. I hope that makes sense. I have another chart here on the next slide where it said without the recovery, and then you can see that boost. So this is without the recovery. You can see where that lift happens from 21 to 22 because you go up to 18.5. I hope that makes sense. But again, there was some recovery built into that as well, just not as much as that other slide. This is still a recovery. But you can see, at least this illustrates on this slide, where your lid lifts, to the mayor's point, get. If you put those lid lifts in, you can see that boost to the revenues. So you're moving that line up further than you would even under this no recovery scenario. You're moving that line back up to that blue with the levy lid lifts, and then above with the lid lifts, plus the 1%.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, just because you didn't put it in the header, what amount of, it's a dollar amount. So you're saying $500,000 levy lid lift each of those 2 times. Is that right, Mr. Hammoud?
Approximately, yes.
So that would be equal to like 6%. Does that sound right? Every 3 years?
Approximately.
Got it. Okay. So so this is taking the 1% every year, and then every 3 years going out for a 6% catch up to the voters. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and I do apologize. It's 2025 would be the implementation. So it's actually voted on in 2024.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
I did mislabel. I'm sorry.
Well, just a quick note. One of the reasons why, as the council knows, we did a Levee Lift in 2012. We did one in 2016. And we were kind of due for another one in 2020, but the reason why we didn't make any plans for that is we thought the Salish expansion would be coming in. So we had another bucket of a tool in our box that we were able to anticipate so that we would, to like many of us talked about, to protect the quality of life and keep property taxes down, to look for those other revenue sources and diversify revenue sources. Well, when that disappeared, now it sort of opens up the dire need for another Levee Lift or some other strategies, because a little harder to predict when those developments for other revenue sources can manifest. The only other point I wanted to quickly make too was that, Iman, when he passed the property tax initiative or pushed it out there, made the point that, hey, he's not trying to stop communities from raising taxes to pay for things. He just wanted to force elected councils to always go to the voters to do that. Well, it wouldn't be a very efficient to go out every single year for one if you're looking for a couple $100,000 when the election costs are $45,000 to $50,000. It's just very wasteful to do that. That's why it's better to structure it usually on a 3 or 4 year cycle so you can spread that cost out.
Any more questions on these slides here? And we can always go back at the end of this.
Councilor Ross.
At one point, you had shown a sales tax increase. So would we do the Levee Lift instead of sales tax increase?
It absolutely, council can choose whichever tool it wants. We kind of, with internal discussions and with the mayor pro tem as well, decided maybe during a recovery with COVID, where the retail market had been slammed, would not be the best time to bring a retail sales tax increase out. It's certainly a very viable tool. So for that reason, along with the fact that a retail sales tax tied to transportation doesn't have as much unrestricted, it's not as unrestricted as a Levee Lift would give you in terms of the revenue sources, because it is tied to your streets maintenance or capital, which has a little more restriction in terms of how it benefits your operational budget. So for those reasons, and the fact that the amount in the neighborhood of $500,000 or $600,000 was pretty much identical to the amounts we would propose for a Levee Lift. So we thought, well, it's six of one, half dozen of the other. I certainly don't have any heartburn over the council choosing one tool or the other. There's certainly a lot of great optics about the fact that we have one of the lowest sales tax rates in the region right now, and we can push the idea that the many tourists coming to town will help pay for our streets and infrastructure than it would be on the backs of others as well. And yeah, so again, happy to entertain all those tools. But the point being, though, if you replaced one of these Levee Lifts with a 0.2% sales tax, you wouldn't really see any difference in the dashed line, because it would be basically swapping out the same approximate amount.
Does that have to be voted, the sales tax?
Yes, it would. And if the court ends up overturning the TBD, the other strength in selling the 0.2% is you can say, hey, your card tab fees are going away, but we can replace it with this. We can more than double the amount of revenue, take care of your streets, tourists pay for it, and our sales tax rates are still low.
Okay, so this is another scenario here. So this is independent of the one you saw before. So this
hang on, Robert, before you go, Councilor Sumwall had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Do both of those votes require 60%?
No, they do not. Simple majority.
Not for the Levee Lift.
Correct. Levee Lift only requires a simple majority. It's not a capital.
Okay, I'm confused. So there's
Only
a sales tax and there's a Levee Lift. Doesn't Levee Lift require 60 and sales tax is 50?
no, only projects that are paying for capital, like a fire station or a community center.
Gotcha.
Those are the ones that require a super majority. When it comes to operational, it's a simple majority vote. as I understand, unless Bob Sturbank or Robert would correct me otherwise, all those streets are kind of capital. It's considered ongoing maintenance of capital and streets. So again, it's seen as more operational and capital, and so it only requires a simple majority.
Yes, for voters, the 0.2% sales tax would be simple majority, same thing with the levels.
Councilmember Stumwell, I don't know if you still have a question. Your hand is up.
I do not, sorry.
I can't help but call on Councilmember Jeans. He has a bemused look that suggests he might have a question or comment.
No,
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
So again, this scenario is completely independent. This is no taxes. It's not the 1%. This is just what would the mill site plus the S21 parcel. Again, the S21 parcel is very small, would only generate, approximately 100,000. It's up and running a year is what we baked into the forecast here. Maybe 150 of the Rosier Outlook in the out years. So that's a small parcel, but this is really the bulk of this is the mill site. We decided that we don't think the mill site's going to happen until 2023. This again shows the COVID recovery. So we're assuming we're back to pretty much where we were in 22. And then you can see where the mill site would take effect into 23.
Again, so this slide is strictly taking out of the growth and development bucket.
But this is again assuming that there's no start of the mill site till 23. And so its impact would actually be beyond the forecast here. And this is the same chart, again, without the recovery. So you can see more of the effect of the impact of the mill site, getting that line back above the original revenue.
Continue, Robert. I think everyone's adequately depressed by this one.
Okay, and that's all I have for today.
Now, Robert, are you prepared now? You said to me a week or so ago that you could, on the fly, sort of put different combination scenarios. So, I mean, unfortunately, we only about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Let's break 5 minutes early tonight. So not a whole lot of time, but I think now from this point on, to get to Councilmember Sunwall's point, it really should be about the council just being able to roll up there, or to Councilmember Lasay's point too, just rolling up your sleeves and starting to have a discussion with each other about which mix of these tools do you think would be the best strategy, or that you find the majority would find acceptable to pursue and give direction to the administration to make a priority in this year and the coming years. And Robert should be able to start putting those together on the fly. In other words, say, hey, put this in, put that in, put this in from the different buckets, and then he can produce a scenario that sort of shows those various mixes. Say.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have a starting point, and I feel like any place we start right away is going to be longer than a 13-minute conversation right now. So I think that's a great way to go to our next meeting. And then we do have a fifth Monday this month. I believe we have a fifth Monday this month. But I'd like to ask two things. One is the savings that you mentioned that you think you can take in just tightening the belt as opposed to reduction in service for the administration. I'd like to understand a little bit more what that means. And at the same time, then I would envision that our as we go through this process, it's going to be a bit of, if I do this, then this happens, and if I do that, then this happens. So I'd like to encourage our council members to let's focus on the next biennium. Obviously, we don't want to put us in a position where the future is at risk. I don't think anyone wants that. But if we're trying to solve for 2020, then solve for 21 and 22, that's going to be a big challenge in itself. And so I just encourage folks to, while some of these forecasts may look out to 2025 and 2026, let's keep in mind that we may have to do this again. And right now, I think our immediate effort is to try to come up with solutions that help us for 2020 and then the biennial 21-22.
I think that's I think the point you just made about the some of the immediate expenses is I think a great way we can spend the balance of our time this evening. Councilman C, I love the points you made. I guess the only thing I would add to that is the council also should keep in mind of what variables are in your control and which are not. So even if you made a commitment, I will say this, just speaking, and Bob Jeans or Brian Holloway could contradict me if they see fit, but we've had many conversations like this in the past when we were facing these similar fiscal cliffs. The mill site was a product of a plan B. In other words, the Salish Lodge expansion was being delayed and delayed and delayed. And there were times we were thinking, well, what if this thing never happens? We better have a plan B in our pocket. So whether it's a levee lid lift or a development proposal, whatever else, you have to always be thinking about, well, what if plan A doesn't work? Because you'll have a lot of combination of things that have to fall into place. And so that's why it is important to, I don't disagree with the fact of looking at the next 2 years, but you really do have to be looking beyond that as well to make sure that if certain pieces don't come into play, you're not jeopardizing the future as well. But Rick and Robert, could you, with the remaining few minutes here, try to provide the council with a little more detail? We have about another 5 minutes on what are some of the measures we could take to do some immediate cost cuts to the tune of $400,000 to $500,000 for the remainder of 2020.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just go a little bit. Like you said, we have 5 minutes or 6 minutes, but kind of some of the things that we're thinking of, and then Robert can help. Obviously, union negotiations to talk about some type of freezes, whether that would be COLA raises, longevity, whatever that would be, to just start those negotiations where everything is fair to not only represented but non-represented employees. Basic hiring freeze, freeze merit increases, freeze pay for performance right now, freeze COLA, consolidate positions. So for example, I have an executive assistant position open that I have not filled due to the budget talks. However, we do have an events coordinator position that it has been in the talks about not doing too many events. So a scenario could be combining the events coordinator with the administrative or executive assistant. That would save a whole FTE. So there would be some salary savings as well as personnel savings on that side. Keep the employee and still provide the service that we need with events and with executive assistants. So that would be an example. And then looking at maybe consolidating where employees could help a department over here and help a department over here to basically take care of maybe a full-time employee. Because some of your biggest savings are with employees because you got salary plus benefits on top of it. So we're looking at that, and it's not a reduction in service because you're still providing the service, but you're just, like I said, consolidating the position. You're asking more of an employee. However, at this time, that's pretty basic. I mean, it's something that is done rather than the obvious. So, Robert, you want to add to that? Any other things that we're looking at as well?
Yeah, we're looking at that. We're looking at freezes of services and supplies. This year for 20 per se, again, we have cost savings in areas of our budget like travel and training. I mean, we have nobody going to travel or training except for some public safety necessary certifications. So essential travel only, that's resulted in savings. The vacancy savings that we talked about, we have some retirements this year. That's resulted in some savings. So again, trying to hold, different mechanisms to try to hold flat those cost increases, or at least flatten out the curve that you see in out years on personnel services and also on contracts for service. Those are some things we can evaluate. I know we have a couple contracts coming up, so we can look at our service contracts as well.
Thank you, Robert. And to Council Members Lasay's question about the biennial budget, those things we're looking at now, we plan on carrying over into the new biennial 21-22 budget. So that'll save us in 20, so we don't have to use as many reserves. We want to keep our reserves as robust as they can be. but also carrying that over into 21 and 22 will help. So there's a hybrid, if you will, of savings from staff or departments, use of reserves, and then use, like we talked, of taxes and fees. It's not money that's just sitting around that we're not using. Obviously, we are temporarily freezing or taking away certain things so we can make it for the next couple of years, and then we reevaluate what we can from there. So those are some of the basic things we're talking about now that we think we can do that would help with our whole budget process moving forward. So I know we're running out of time, but we'll be able to talk about this more and bring actual numbers to the council in the next few meetings we have, because Robert and I are working on that right now and working on a bottom line of what that number is going to be. So thank you.
And I'll just add real quickly, I think I'm loath to have us fall behind on cost of living increases so that we become non-competitive compared to other communities. But I suspect we're probably pretty safe in the next or remainder of this year, next year, as many communities will be doing similar measures. Lastly, there's there's a couple of departments, as I understand, that are underspending their budgets right now that may be able to offer up some savings without, again, compromising those departments. An example in one department would be maybe even things that the council would need to let go of this. It would be like a tourism plan. If tourism probably is going to be kind of on a chill during the COVID in the next year, the activities certainly won't be the same, or an affordable housing plan, even as the markets change. So there's opportunities for maybe, 30,000 here, 50,000 there to, again, chip away at some of those costs. We have only we're right at, I think, 6:55 now, but I have Councilmember Sunwall and Mayhew, if you have some brief wrap-ups, so we can at least have a little break before the council meeting begins.
Yeah, Rick, do you feel like, I think it's 500,000 we need to shave? Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's the target number.
You feel like with the belt tightening and what I'm considering belt tightening are the types of things you described. Do you feel like there's 500K there?
Right now, in our initial talks, yes.
Well, if you keep talking, will there be 750?
Don't push it, but we're looking at 5. But I mean, if it's a little bit more, that'll just help us in the future. If it's a little bit less, I think it still helps. But that's our target number. Nice try.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, just quick point. I think you just made this point, Mayor, but Council, we had budgeted 200,000, as I recall, for transportation, housing studies, which I don't believe any of that money's been spent, or only a very, very small amount, if any. And I think maybe given the situation, we can assist by chipping in that 200. So if that's 200 on top of 500, I really think I'd like to know going forward how much reserve use was presumed in those numbers that we saw. Maybe it was 0, and that's something we still yet to throw in. But I think as much as we can help now, we ought to. So maybe that's something we as a council could be ready to make a decision on to help out as well.
That's great. That's awesome. That would get to the 750 that Councilmember Sunwall is looking for.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and break it there. Give ourselves at least 4 minutes or so before the council meeting starts. And
Are we using the same call, same dial-in?
yeah, I believe we just can
Okay.
pause your videos, whatever, for a few minutes, and we'll just queue up.
Yes.
Why don't we start a little bit late? Maybe let's say 7:03. We'll start the council meeting. Oh. Is someone, Robert, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you maybe give the hosting back to Kevin or whoever else needs to, unless it's going to be you, and
No.
get the presentation for the council meeting prepped up. We just, so we're all set to go in a few minutes. We are going to have a few distinguished guests coming here this evening, including the some representatives of the Y and Principal Belcher to receive a proclamation for the 2020 class.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yeah.
This is Mark.
Yeah.
I can get that set up for you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
For any members of the public that are joining us, we're going to be starting at about 7:03 sharp. We ran a little long on our roundtable meeting that preceded the council meeting. So if you just hang with us for a few minutes, we'll get started just momentarily. Kevin, could you move Nate Smith over to the participant side? So in case he wants to speak, he could be afforded that opportunity.
Sir.
Not sure if we have a quorum of the council back yet. All right, with that, I'll call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. And I'll ask Jody to please state the roll call.
Councilmember James,
Here.
Councilmember Ross,
Here.
Councilmember Holloway,
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew,
Here.
Councilmember Lassay,
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd. Here. Mayor Larson. Mayor Larson.
I'm sorry, I thought I unmuted. I said I'm here. Did you
Okay,
hear me?
thank you. I got it.
All right, council, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, I would like to take the warrants off of the consent agenda and I can't see the other item, but the other item on the agenda.
The minutes.
No, the AB 2063.
I guess point of information, if you don't know what it is, why are you taking it off the consent agenda?
I knew what it was. I just didn't know what it was called, and I couldn't see the name of it.
Okay, any other items, council? Councilmember Shepherd, I asked you maybe to, I think you know how to maybe modify your name. Take a look at that real quick. Okay, any other comments, suggestions, or anything else? All right, with those changes then, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, all those opposed?
No.
All right, motion is carried. With that, we're going to move on to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. I'm pleased to give a proclamation regarding the Mount Si High School class of 2020 tonight, and I'm honored that Principal John Belcher has joined us this evening to receive this on behalf of the graduating class. There's a proclamation honoring Mount Si High School graduating class of 2020. Whereas Mount Si High School seniors are emblematic of all things that make our community a great place to live and work, and whereas the 2019-2020 academic year, traditional senior activities and commencement ceremonies have been interrupted as a result of the global coronavirus pandemic, and whereas Mount Si High School seniors have led by example and laid the foundation for good citizenship through their strength, sacrifice, and perseverance in this time of uncertainty. And whereas during this unprecedented challenge, our seniors represent a bright future, and through application of each student's unique talents and abilities, will continue to lead along the path of service and leadership. And whereas the city of Snoqualmie and neighboring communities supports and congratulates all the graduating seniors of Mount Si High School and encourages all residents to support these students as they enter the next chapter of their lives. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Matthew R. Larson, Mayor of the city of Snoqualmie, do hereby proclaim June 2020 Mount Si High School Class of 2020 Recognition Month. Go Wildcats. So with that, John, I'd welcome you to make a few comments if you'd like. I think you can unmute yourself. If not, we could do that for you. John, are you able to unmute yourself? Or Kevin, if you could just, maybe if you can't do it, if you could do that for him. For John Belcher. He's the one that's cleverly put his picture into his, or John, if you could maybe turn your video on too, that'd be great.
Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry about that. That was terrible trying to figure that out. Thanks so much. I just want to thank you guys for a busy night, for honoring our students. You know, I think this class could use all the help they can get with their mental health and feeling like there's some hope for the future. So grateful that you guys are honoring them and taking a little bit of time. And I can see some of the names here. I know a couple of you have senior students as well. So thank you. And on a second note, I just want to thank City of Snoqualmie being so helpful in helping us organize our senior parade. I know that took quite a bit of work by numerous people in your city, and just grateful you guys are helping us push that through and going to have a great day on the 19th. Hopefully we see you out there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, John. I know you're speaking for the council by saying we're happy to have this opportunity to recognize the seniors with a proclamation, and I'm excited about the parade too. I think it's something that'll be not only a great way to recognize the seniors, given the tough year they've had to face, but the whole community needs such a celebration right now. So appreciate all the time that you have put into putting that event together. I know it's going to be a big day. So thank you so much. Thanks, and thanks for taking the time to join us tonight.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. With that, we will move on to a presentation from our, again, we kind of do an annual report or check-in with our Snoqualmie Valley YMCA, and we have Stephanie Norton Brettel here tonight. and Executive Director Nate Smith, who will be, so I'll turn it over to them. I don't know which one of you want to take the baton at this point. Stephanie, are you going to queue up and do a presentation at this time? And again, Kevin, if you could assist with getting those two, Stephanie and Nate.
I think I successfully unmuted.
Perfect.
Can you, okay. I'm not sure if I can do the camera. Every time I've tried, it says unable to, let me try.
Okay.
Unless someone else can do that.
That's okay, Stephanie. We'll
Okay.
get your presentation up and then we'll.
Okay, great. Thank you for having us. I invited Nate Smith to join me as he was the executive director at the Snoqualmie Valley Y up until, I don't remember exactly, was it October?
Yeah, it was October, yep.
Yeah, and then I began my first day as branch executive in Snoqualmie on the day we closed our branch due to COVID. So it's been an interesting first quarter as branch executive, but Nate and I collaborated on this presentation, and he's going to present a little bit about the past, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing now and hope to do in the future. So Nate, I think I'll baton to you.
Sure, great. So if you can, I don't have control of the slide, so if we can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk, like we have in our other annual reports, about some of the programming we've done, sort of bucketing those in youth, adults and seniors, teens, some of our social responsibility work, and our community engagements. And so we'll go ahead and do that. So we can move to the next slide. It's great being back in front of all you guys. I haven't seen everyone in such a long time. And I have not had the pleasure of being part of a council meeting via Zoom. So check that off the list of things. So just some general statistics about what we accomplished in 2019. Just a kind of a snapshot. So we had about 3,500 members of the Y as sort of the high water mark for the year. About 88,000 folks checked into the facility throughout the 2019, and 16,000 kids were checked into the Kids Zone on-site childcare program during that time. We employed about 72 staff, give or take, depending on the season. That number fluctuates, obviously, kind of a little higher in the summer when we've got camps and things running. As you know, we are open for community meetings, and so we held about 195 of those throughout the calendar year. Our before and after school program is pretty robust in our partnership with the school districts. So we're in a variety of different schools throughout the district, serving about 250 kids every day. And our summer camp is around 1,900 weeks of summer camp last year. And then we gave out just under $100,000 in scholarships for membership for folks to be able to be a member of the Y. And then, you can see that there are just about 70,000 in summer and school age scholarship dollars awarded. We can jump to the next page. So I kind of wanted to highlight just a few areas, and some of it will sound familiar or you might have heard of before, but we've had some continued growth in our after school programming. We've had such a great relationship with our partners at the district and able to use that relationship to provide more opportunities for kids to have activities after school. Our Play Every Day program, which is a program that runs during recess time at the schools as well. So we send the staff to the school during their recess time to play structured games and things like that to get kids engaged during the time when a lot of them are actually not as active as you would assume. Summer camp continues to be an area that grows. For those who are aware, we opened up a new summer camp this last year just outside the city limits of Snoqualmie on Tolkle Road called Camp Color. And that's a whole separate conversation we'd love to have with everybody about that. It's a 40-acre property that we're just doing day camp opportunities last summer on. So that has been a fun addition to what we have going on. with our summer camp program. And then lastly, in partnership with our friends at the Snoqualmie Tribe, we sent 60 kids up to Camp Orkyla for a week-long camp experience. So those are some of the highlights there. Jumping over to some of our adult and senior programs, we continue to grow our senior social events and trips, so going to a variety of places throughout the Valley, as well as the East Side and into Seattle for group activities. We've been coordinating more weekly activity groups, doing a variety of different games, and so they have been meeting at the Y throughout the calendar year to take part in those types of activities. Also, our chronic disease prevention programming continues to be an area that we are seeing more folks get engaged in, such as for Parkinson's and those types of programs. Again, something that we're proud that we're able to do. And then our enhanced fitness classes, which those are classes just geared for active older adults, serve about 30-ish participants every time we host those several times a week. So a large number of folks staying active and healthy in that demographic through classes that we offer throughout the calendar year. I won't read the quote here in front of you because that would be a little bit long and boring, but the point of this is that, like, a lot of numbers look good and we like to share those and they talk about a lot of different things, but in reality, this is the reason that we operate and do the things that we do. You know, these types of messages are what we get to hear on a daily basis. We just want to make sure that we share those with you. And so here's just one of our members sharing with us how they feel about what the Ys provide to them. And we can go, yep, thank you, to the next one. Our teen programming for 2019 really took a jump, especially in the fall. We hired a full-time teen outdoor coordinator. We've had a teens position on and off over the years as we try to figure out how we serve teens in Snoqualmie, and it's been like everyone's a hard nut to crack in terms of how you engage teens in the way that they want to be engaged and in meaningful ways. And so we decided that for a variety of reasons that we would pivot our focus to providing more outdoor experiences. I mean, we are at the foot of the mountains, and so what better way than to engage teens in using the outdoor to our advantage. And so we were able to lead some Boy Scout avalanche training, some other Boy Scout trips and experiences. We worked with the high school, Mountainside High School, Two Rivers program to do some experiential learning projects across the Valley as part of their school day. We started some job shadowing programs for them. Again, some of that was focused on outdoor education, but also on other kind of industries. Our Air Service Corps program, again, is getting kids into the outdoors. That picture in the bottom right corner of the screen, that's exactly what that is. It's taking kids outside to engage in education. And so, again, serving middle schoolers in early high school with that particular program. And then Youth in Government is a program that we've been running for several years where kids get kind of engaged in a year-long process to learn more about their local government and how the process kind of works. So those are some of the highlights of what we had done in teen work this year. And then I'm getting to the end of my section here, but social responsibility work. So these are the things that are stuff that we can kind of sort of quantify. We run a couple different community gardens across the community. And so volunteers operate and maintain those. And you can see a lovely picture of one of our volunteers harvesting some of the things that we produced in our community gardens. And so those were donated to the local food bank this year. The community shower program, which is something that has, this community doesn't maybe know that we do as much, but is something that everyone should be very proud of, because there's not very many places that are able to accomplish this. We provide those who need access to a shower facility. They either don't have that in their home or in a need of that, the opportunity to come to the facility and do that free of charge. And so we hosted over 2,700 of those last calendar year. And that's an amazing way for us to give to the community who needs us. We also provide 75 meals to the shelter through a variety of programs, donate gift cards, still work on the Stillwater Bog project. So if you know where the Stillwater Bog is, it's up behind the Y. We've been spending the last couple years clearing blackberry bushes and other invasive plants off of that space so that it can be replanted with native species. And then we run quarterly blood drives in partnership with Bloodworks. Let's get, yep, and here's another one of those stories. Jack is someone who does come to the facility on a almost daily basis to take a shower and have a place where he can feel safe for a little while. So we feel fortunate that we were able to provide that for him and for others who need it. And we'll go to the next slide. There we go. I'm going to pass this over to Stephanie to take us the rest of the way.
Thank you, Nate. So last year we engaged in a variety of community events that we hope to be able to re-engage in once we're able. Some with our community partners, some that we did on our own, things like Healthy Kids Day, monthly lunch and jumps, splash and play, workshops with REI. We engaged with some of our community partners and different cultural groups to offer a variety of programming around Native American Heritage Month, Pride, Latinx, Black History Month, Indian dance workshops, Chinese New Year's events. And then supporting others through hosting or using our space for PTSA events, serving shelter meals, and then things like the Bloodworks blood bank that we've done in the past. Go ahead and switch the slide. Thank you. And then it's a pretty long list of community partnerships that we hope to continue as we move forward. I've been in contact with a few of these organizations just in recent months as we got our shower program started again, and just to introduce myself and help continue to foster those relationships that allow us to better serve the community. You can go ahead and forward the slide, please. And then just in the recent months, we had to shift our focus to when we were forced to close to the public, how can we respond to the community and the current needs? So we closed our facilities for normal operations on March 16th. On March 30th, we started break camp for families of first responders. We started out with 3 to 5 kids that first week. Now we're averaging about 15 kids a week. It took us 3 or 4 weeks to get up to that, and have pretty consistently had 15 kids a week, sometimes up to 20. And break camp will go through the end of this week. Then we'll go ahead and take a week off, and then we'll resume summer camp, day camp at Camp Keller and Camp Terry. They're still working on securing Cascade View and possibly another site in Snoqualmie, but that hasn't been finalized yet. We are right now preparing to reopen for phase 3 of the governor's plan, and we are preparing our facilities for modified operations. So just to give you kind of a quick picture of what that might look like, we've had to spread out our equipment throughout the facility so that there could be appropriate social distancing. We'll have certain programs that we won't be running right away. Our youth programming, our teen programming, our kids zone. And we're getting ready to reactivate some of our staff so that they can start getting trained up on all these new protocols when we open our doors. Right now, we're looking at possibly the end of June. But again, it all depends on when King County enters phase 3 of the governor's plan. And go ahead and go to the last slide then. And then just another quote from one of our families. This is one of our families that we were able to serve during this COVID response. And it's been a very rewarding to be able to offer this type of programming and to continue to provide a service. But it's also been a real commitment from our staff to be there, and we're very proud of the staff that have continued to work on the front lines here as we've continued to offer programming. Any questions?
Councilmember Sunwall.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, and I look forward to meeting you in person at some point.
Yes.
I think I heard you say that you're not doing like the kid zone stuff. Did I hear that correctly?
Not in our first phase of reopening.
So I'm just curious, what is, obviously you guys have thought a lot about that. What was the rationale that you came up?
It was all around risk management and being able to keep those spaces clean to the level of what the public would expect. So we're looking at alternatives for some family programming and possibly some outdoor programming, but we haven't finalized that yet.
Okay, that's, I thank you for that. None of these decisions are very easy. I do struggle with things that, you know, we're talking about kids who are the least affected of anybody with Corona. So I'm always curious when kids stuff starts to, and I'm not asking you to defend the decision. I'm just
right, yeah,
curious about that.
Well, I think Nate and I can both say that we both realize that not opening Kid Zone right away is going to put up some barriers for our members, and we've certainly voiced that concern. But also know that our association is doing our best to try to control the environment as much as we can right now as we ramp up operations. So I think as we see how things go, that may happen sooner or later than we expect.
And I would just quickly add to Sean to answer your question also is that we're dealing with capacity issues as well, with numbers of human beings in the building, and how do you allocate spaces and moving equipment into different parts of the facility? How do you best maximize your square footage and stay within the kind of guidelines around occupancy that we're following? So I think you put that into the pot together, and that's where we kind of come up with it.
No, I understand. Stephanie, you walk that tightrope really well. Well, I just, again, I don't want to leave any sour taste. What you guys doing is amazing. I appreciate what you guys do for our community. That wasn't intended to be a criticism. It was just a curiosity question.
Right, yeah.
So Stephanie, I know you and I had spoken briefly a month or so ago. I think everybody would be curious how you're faring financially. I suspect with the pictures I've seen with the opening that you're doing, spreading the calisthenic equipment across the gymnasium floor, you're needing to focus on revenue generating activities for obvious reasons. I think in the demographic we have in Snoqualmie, you're probably at least fortunate here that a lot of people are just keeping their memberships and paying the dues, which is mitigating the impact, but you're not experiencing that, as I understand it, other areas of the King County region, in the south end. So we're kind of short on time, but if you could very briefly maybe speak to how you're faring financially.
Sure. Right now, we're doing okay. We've had a couple of really good months with the savings. So we put about 90% of our staff on standby, and staffing is our largest expense. We've done a lot of cost saving measures around what we need our maintenance companies to do, around canceling subscriptions and things like that. So we actually did some pretty good cost savings over the past 3 or 4 months. And right now we're forecasted to have a positive net at the end of the year. But that all depends on, as what this situation continues to look like. We are working on avenues for revenue as we move into what may be possibly a partly virtual world as we continue to operate in the branch. So looking at personal training and things like that that can be done virtually. They're doing a lot of our chronic disease prevention programming virtually as we speak. And so the association's working on with each of the branches on trying to find those revenue sources as we continue. But mostly the savings that we've occurred have helped us have a pretty good forecast for the future.
And by standby, when you refer to staff, I assume that's the equivalent of furlough, or they're effectively not being paid at this time?
Right. Their benefits have been paid if they were eligible for benefits, but they've been essentially furloughed.
All right, thank you. Again, thank you both for taking the time to give us an update this year, and hang in there, Stephanie. By your video not working, the mystery continues.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move on to citizens' comments. I see one or two names there. I'm not sure who Galaxy 8 is, so I'll quickly go over some of the ground rules on citizens' comments. Snoqualmie citizens have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, comments for those who do attend council meetings will be limited to 3 minutes each. Second, please wait to be recognized and state your name and address for the record. You can be recognized by below on the participants tab. If you open that up down at the bottom, you can see where it says raise my hand, and you can raise your hand and I'll try to call upon you. 3, direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members in order to protect the privacy rights of employees and to protect the members of the public from legal liability. Please note that this is not an appropriate venue to make complaints or accusations about an implied or named city employee or agent. Such oral comments will not be allowed, but can be submitted in writing to the city clerk. And please note that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will simply quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. Don't take their silence as an act of disrespect. They're just here to listen. And 5, please respect the decorum of these proceedings, as all due respect will be afforded to you. So with that, is there anybody attending here tonight from the public? And by the way, thank you for taking time out of your evening that would like to comment on any item that is not on the agenda at this time. I'll give a few moments for you to find the raise hand button. All right, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be enacted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the May 26, 2020 roundtable and regular city council meetings. It also includes approval of warrants as stated in the agenda packet. Council, do I have a motion in a second?
Order.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
Warrants were removed from the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So thank you very much, Councilman Say. That is correct. So again, the action for approval only involves the minutes for the May 26, 2020 roundtable and regular city council meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
I assume you meant to have a motion and a second to approve as presented and amended, Councilmember Holloway?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this transaction? Seeing no one's hand go up, council, any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is carried. Councilmember Mayhew, you were in a conversation last week with me. We're suggesting a little bit of a different protocol on items that are removed. Did you want to address those at this time, or?
No, I'm going to, we got sidetracked over this last week with another matter, so I'm going to bring that at the next council meeting.
All right. So if the council chairs of the committee of F&A could help me remember to take the warrants under F&A and Agenda Bill 063, remind me, staff or folks, that was Parks and Public Works, I assume?
So F&A.
That was definitely.
Okay, so just remind me to catch those when we get to F&A. All right, under ordinances, Community Development Committee, Agenda Bill 20059, ordinance amending section 8.14.010. I'm sorry, council, I'm going to back way up. I missed a major piece of protocol here, and I'm kind of embarrassed given its significance. Back up to public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments. I would, at this time, it's my pleasure to present to you my request to confirm Rick Ruda-Metkin as our permanent city administrator. Council may have confirmation.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to confirm the appointment of Rick Ruda-Metkin to the position of city administrator. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this appointment prior to council action? All right, seeing no questions, councilors, any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
All right, motion is approved. I'm sorry, was there, I heard something else there.
Somebody said yay.
That was Brian's cat.
All right, congratulations, Rick.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
And sorry about that faux pas there.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Many things going on at once. All right, back to ordinances. Agenda Bill 20-059, ordinance amending section 8.14.010, section 14.30.020, section 15.12.160, section 17.15.040, section I'm trying to think of a way to do this, reading all these sections. Section 17.60.050, section 17.65.030, section 17.75.020, section 19.12.080 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, and adding a new section 17.55.130 to the Snoqualmie Municipal Code to correct various inconsistencies, conflicts, and typographical errors in development codes. This was introduced on the 26th and is ready for action tonight.
Do you want me to read it?
Just the motion. Just the motion.
Motion to adopt ordinance
1234.
amending everything that Mayor Larson just read.
Second.
I think that's cheating, but okay, I'm gonna allow it.
Unless you want to hear it again. So I'll start off as chair of community development. So as you recall, during our last council meeting, there were two items that council members were going to propose motions for. One was a 3-foot fence height, and the other is universal parking stall size. And the parking stall size, Councilmember Lissay will get into in a little bit later. So we discussed these items at our last community development meeting. And I want to touch a little bit on the fence height. So the purpose of the proposed change in this ordinance was to address the sight of distance at the intersection for safety purposes. The community development department gave an example of a fence that was constructed at the corner of King Street and blocked drivers' sight at the intersection. So because there was not an ordinance to prohibit that, they had to move the stop sign so that cars can see around the fence. Any other changes to the proposed fence regulations would be more aesthetics, and there are different implications to think about. One would be public alleyways would be possibly considered a public street, and so would you be limiting the fence height there to 3 foot versus 6 foot? What I'm suggesting is that we adopt the code as proposed, and then ask Planning Commission to evaluate the aesthetic fence standards and have them provide recommendation. So I actually have a motion for that, if you're ready for the motion. So I make a motion.
Um,
Go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew, you had a point of order question or point
Yeah,
of?
I just think, just thinking about our dinosaurs training, I think since this is a separate motion, I think you have to get through this motion and then come back to that as a separate motion.
I'll defer to,
Two main motions.
yeah, I'll defer to our parliamentarian or Jody or Bob Sturbank. I'm not sure if we're required to open up debate if someone wants to immediately make a motion for a baby dinosaur.
But I think the Mayor, this is Bob Sturbank. It sounds like that is to not necessarily amend this motion, but to have a motion relating to a separate topic. So like properly stated as a separate motion, and after this motion is dealt with, unless the intent is to change the substance of the underlying ordinance here.
Right, and it's not. So I can do this then after we go through the other motion.
Or Councilmember Ross, maybe to clarify confusion, because maybe I understand it differently than Councilmember Mayhew. There was quite a bit of discussion at the committee level about maybe modifying it to allow 3 feet, 3-foot fences, not only for safety, but for aesthetics throughout the historic downtown. Are you suggesting in a motion that be proposed to say, bring that idea back to the Planning Commission and seek their recommendation on that idea and then bring it back again, or?
So what I'm proposing is we approve the proposed fence regulations as stated, and we would ask Planning Commission to look at the aesthetics, which would be the 3-foot portion. So it would still state fences located. What we would approve would be fences located between buildings and public streets and within 60 feet of intersecting center lines of an intersection shall be no taller than 3 foot. That would be, we would approve that. I think what other discussion was that maybe we would do 3 foot on all public streets and not necessarily the intersection. And that would have there would be different implications if we did that. So I'm just proposing the Planning Commission can kind of take a look at overall fence heights and come up with some standards. So in the meantime, we need to fix this particular code so that tomorrow another person cannot build a fence right at an intersection.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think it makes sense then to debate the current motion and perhaps have a vote on it, and then you can propose, before we move on, to send back discussions on the other idea back for a separate proposal to be, or ordinance to be brought forward to the council. So let's open it up for any, well, first of all, open it to any comments from the public at this time on this item. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment at this time? Seeing no hands go up. Again, use the raise hand in your participants tab. We'll open it up for discussion from the council. Councilmember Jeans.
So safety first, that's the foundation of everything. But a person who builds a backyard fence is usually to keep a dog inside or to keep other people from outside. And a 3-foot fence seems impractical that a dog can jump over the fence and people can easily climb over a 3-foot fence and get in your backyard. So it's probably not unsurmountable to solve that, what I think is a dilemma or resistance from adjacent property owners. But we ought to be keeping that in mind, that there could be a lot of blowback from fences that have been up for years and those people being asked to take down their fences.
Just a quick clarification. No, it would be grandfathered. So anybody that has an existing fence would not be asked to take it down.
Okay.
Councilman Lassay? Councilman Lassay?
There's that mute button. All right. I'm going to move on from fences and just dive into the amendment that I would like to propose, specifically related to parking and parking stalls. And we discussed this both at community development and at the previous council meeting. And I distributed some information to all the council members and the mayor, including Jason Rogers and Mark Hoffman today, spelling out the details. So at this time, so we can have a discussion about this, I would move to amend the Planning Commission recommendation to modify SMC 17.65.030 to establish a standard universal parking stall dimension of 8 feet by 18 feet and additional edits as noted in the distributed memo.
Second.
We have a motion and a second as stated by Councilman Losay. Councilman Losay, did you want the staff to weigh in? Because I'm not sure that there's any objections to the staff on that modification. Might you find that helpful, or did you want to speak?
I distributed to staff early this morning, and I meant to do it last week, but got tied up in some other things. I did not get any response. So I'm not sure if there is any comments on staff, but I don't know if it is needed.
Well,
two comments. There's no issues with the language. I would just clarify with Jason that it works with his understanding of the ordinance as drafted, so that it's clear as we emerge from tonight.
This is Jason here. It does, and I was actually about to ask if I could screen share for a second, Mark Gherkin, because I can then thank you. I'll put Councilmember Lasay's text up here so that people can see it.
Well, I guess point of order, Mayor.
Holloway and Ross, I see your hands are up. Go ahead, Councilmember Holloway. Hold on a second.
Just point of question on the motion. You're not actually motioning to change the recommendation of the Planning Commission. You're actually motioning to change the underlying ordinance, correct?
I'm motioning to change what Planning Commission recommended by changing what the ordinance says. It's a little of both.
In other words, the ordinance has a dozen different variations and changes recommended by Planning Commission. He's not recommending a wholesale change. He's recommending just this one portion on parking, a change from what the Planning Commission or staff recommended.
Right, but I guess I have issue with council changing the Planning Commission recommendation. I don't have issue with the council changing the ordinance, given further information, but what the Planning Commission recommended, the Planning Commission recommended.
I see what you're saying, Brian. And he's correct. So I guess if that point can be taken and understood, yeah, I'm not asking the Planning Commission to change their recommendation. I'm saying I'm proposing a motion to change the ordinance differently than they recommended.
Right.
Okay, now I understand what your point was.
If you want,
I guess
we on this.
Can we take that as a modification of his motion so Jody can capture that a little bit differently in the semantics?
I would just say we just remove the part about PC recommendation and just move to amend SMC 17.65.030.
All right, great. Councilman Ross, did you want to make a quick question or comment before we turn back to Jason or Mark?
I do have a comment. So when you brought it up, I can't read the scheme, but I think it's 8 by 18. Again, and starts out, it states that it's minimum again. And so I always thought it was going to be a set size. It's going to be 8 foot by 18 foot. And anything else would require a modification or a variance from community development. But here you're saying it's a minimum. So does this get back to where we started from then?
No, I stuck with minimum just so that we didn't get a range, but with the understanding that there might be situations where in order to equalize the parking spaces over a distance, say you needed to do 6 or 7 or 8 stalls, that say they needed to be 8'3", so you don't have wasted property, or you run into a situation where there's something in terms of the length that if the angle of the property or something that happens with the parking area where some of your stalls may end up being 18 feet 4 or 18'6", that the applicant isn't necessarily, or the permit applicant isn't necessarily penalized for having them slightly off in dimension, that they can default to be slightly larger. But I did maintain that the community development director can grant some exceptions in certain circumstances to those dimensions.
Jason, you want to continue with your comments and perhaps show the council the schematic that Councilmember Lissay had included too, in case someone did not have a chance to see that.
Sure. This on the screen here is what Councilmember Lissay emailed out to the council and to staff earlier. So you can see what you see in blue is the changes to this section as recommended by the Planning Commission, and that's what's written into the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. And then these strike-throughs and underlines in red are what Councilmember Lissay's change would represent. If I scroll down here, so here is the exhibit that Councilmember Lissay sent along. So you can see it with, he has different angles for parking. So in a 90 degree, you have an 8-foot wide stall and 18 feet long. And this drive aisle would be per the municipal code, which for a two-way aisle would be 20 to 24 feet. And then you can see at the different angles you would maintain this 8-foot wide here, although the physical, if you want to call it the distance along this line here would be of course a little longer because of how triangle math works. But you can see he's maintaining this 8-foot wide, and in this case it ends up to be 19 feet width, but this 18-foot length continues.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. You definitely need, if you've got your protractor and your T-square available, you can calculate these things out. And my daughter just finished out some Pythagorean theorem problems in her 8th grade class, so we had a lot of fun calculating out the angles here.
Is triangle math geometry?
What's that?
Is triangle math otherwise known as geometry?
That could be known as geometry. It's possible that that's what it's called. But the point is that I wanted to provide at least a diagram to show what that means, what some of these things mean. So even though we do allow for some angled parking, and whether it's 60-degree angle or 45-degree angle, and there's a 30-degree angle down below, the resultant still remains the same, that you have an 8-foot wide stall and an 18-foot wide stall, which also goes to that 18-foot long stall, which also goes to those numbers Councilmember Ross was asking about in terms of the dimensions, because they do slightly calc out differently when you are on an angle and doing angle parking. So it does allow for some flexibility, but not flexibility in the sense of being smaller than 8 by 18.
Yeah, and so this is the importance of your reference in your motion to the exhibit provided in the email. So good, because of those variations from the 8 by 18 language.
Correct.
So the council understands. And Councilman will say, I just want to, again, maybe for the sake of time, council members might have a concern about what if there are unintended consequences or undesirable consequences of this, and throw it back to Jason and Mark again to ask. There were obviously reasons why the Planning Commission or the staff are looking to make some tweaks to parking things. Perhaps this actually improves or advances it in that direction. Do you see any undesirable consequences of this? Do you have any concerns, or is this acceptable and a little concern to you?
This proposal is acceptable. The one thing that the council may wish to consider keeping in mind here is if you give me a second, I'm going to scroll back up to the language here. I'll just look at this. This was how it would read without the strike through underline change showing. The way this is written now with minimum set is that you could provide, as Councilmember Lissay described, a larger stall, and these could be anywhere from slightly wider in the case of trying to fill a space to, in theory, much wider. Now, typically, developers and property owners are not going to, if you will, abuse it, because they have an interest, generally speaking, in getting as much parking onto their site as they possibly can. Nobody wants to necessarily run around with, say, a 20-foot wide parking spot, because that's not a good use of land. So to a certain extent, not setting a maximum is self-correcting. The council may wish to consider putting an upper bound of some kind on it to avoid a potential, if you will, abusive interpretation of the code. The other alternative to setting a strict upper limit would be to add some additional language to this section here, talking about the community development director may grant exceptions, to also state the community development director could retain some authority to directly address large parking stalls for large vehicles, such, you know, and that language is here already to a certain extent for RV, commercial truck, or trailer parking. We could attempt to tighten that up a little to make it clear that those are exceptions which need community development director approval.
I think for the sake of time, Jason, if you are recommending something like that, we would need some specific language that you would provide that the council could approve of.
Generally speaking, the parking code uses standards for number of stalls of usually 150% for a maximum. That would be acceptable here to say, so we could say stalls shall not be more than 150% dimensionally of the minimum. So that would equate to, in this case, 12 feet wide and 27 feet long.
So, Councilmember Jeans.
So I have a concern that this might, the simplicity is great, but it might, since there might be more requests for variations, this might overburden the community development director. I'd kind of like to hear whether his thought on that, and whether he can, if these things come to him, whether he can just sort of delegate that within the staff, whether that would ameliorate the situation.
Thank you, Councilmember James. This would actually make it easier because it's clearer. I think the result will be that the very first draft of design that we get would be in keeping with what we're trying to achieve, instead of having multiple rounds in revision. We began to implement in this direction with the Safeway, minimizing overall parking numbers and asphalt, maximizing landscape. But there's a clear difference between the Safeway parking space sizes and the IGA spaces. Based on the feedback that we got from the IGA spaces and the number of compact and the minimal aisle widths, the Safeway design as it sits today is in keeping with this amendment. And so this would actually make it easier for the director and staff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly respond to Jason. I took your comments actually into consideration, and because the code does designate a maximum of 150% elsewhere, I didn't want to duplicate that and try to overburden the process. Basically, just keep it, and Mr. Hoffman just described that, keep it as simple as possible. The language I took for that section, though, I took exactly from what was recommended in the agenda bill. So where the community director can grant exceptions to the above dimensions for these items. So I haven't changed that per se, other than a couple wordsmith items by adding commercial truck and also then amending the comment about minimum. I think it was the minimum and maximum. Just so that it gives the community development director more flexibility to grant exceptions to the dimensions, as opposed to whether it's just a minimum or just a maximum. So I think it still accomplishes what you were recommending in terms of, if you get to a large need for an RV space or for a commercial truck space. I mean, if you notice, I also put in there motorcycle spaces for future reference. If we go that route down in the future, then it is possible for the community development director to say, yes, I will grant a certain percentage of spaces towards motorcycle parking should a function or use come about, such as a repair shop or a motorcycle sales situation, or some sort of use that has motorcycles. You can imagine, maybe that was because motorcycles are on my mind, because I forgot to renew my endorsement. Anyway, I want to make sure something was in there to cover the scenarios at which we might foresee in the future. So.
All right. Any further discussion, questions, council?
Staff just has one more clarification. The exhibit that's attached to Councilmember Lissay's motion is actually very helpful. And there's no link or indication that that will be part of the code language, but I would recommend that's a useful graphic in there.
Actually, I think it would become part of the code language by virtue of his motion, Mark. He did say that.
For the exact, yeah, I meant to have it as part of the attached exhibit. I would welcome staff if they need to clean it up in certain ways. I admittedly did take the diagram from basically a JPEG from the internet and then modified the numbers to work with the dimensions, and so I'd be open to having staff just clean that up.
I just wanted to clarify because we can do a citation within the code language in the ordinance for slight modifications. But I wanted to clarify here that the exhibit should be added to the language so that I'm not making assumptions later. So thank you.
Jody, you have to read back the motion, but I clearly heard Councilmember Slay refer to the exhibits included in the packet or something to that effect. And so my assumption is if that's in the motion, the council approves it, then that gets embedded as an exhibit in the ordinance or in the comp plan. So I assume that could be, Jody, do you want to speak to that in terms of whether you feel that's been captured, Bob Sturbank?
I do have that captured. I've been typing away.
And Bob Sturbank, do you have any concerns about how that would be captured or embedded in the ordinance? Mute button. All right.
Sorry about that, Mayor. It would be helpful if the record indicates Councilmember Lissay's intent to have this exhibit as part of the code amendment language that he moved. I don't recall hearing that specifically. He may have said it, but this could easily be a part of that section as an exhibit to that.
All right. So
I'll confirm that. That was the intent, was that this was that the modified code language and this exhibit was added. I just didn't know how to, is it exhibit 1? Is it exhibit 17.65.030.a? I don't know how the naming would be, so it is intended that that's an exhibit.
Yeah, his motion just said and to include the parking because these are some variations from the 8x18. He referenced the parking exhibit schematic that he included in the email packet. So Jody, if you're comfortable and if there's no objections, I'll just ask that Jody make sure to capture that intent in the motion. If Councilman, let's say if you're okay with her, if you could go with the verbatim tape or at least modify the language to make sure that that intent is captured. You okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
All right.
And Mayor, the ordinance itself has a section, as most of the ordinances do, that allows the city clerk and the city attorney to make typographical corrections and exhibit references and so on. And so we can make sure it has an appropriate reference.
Perfect. Thank you. And of course, you can capture this conversation going back, reading it too. All right. Excellent. Any other comments, questions, discussion, council on this? All right. With that, again, we're voting on the baby dinosaur on the motion to amend from Councilmember Lissay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, sounds like it passes unanimously. So now we're back to the main motion with that amendment. Any further discussion on the main motion? Councilmember Mayhew, I know that you at the committee had wanted to discuss the aesthetics issue of the fences, but it sounds like you're amenable perhaps to this idea that we can take up right after this of sending that back to the Planning Commission for the further discussion and recommendation.
That's correct.
Okay, so you don't, I just want to give you an opportunity to bring it up at this time if you wanted to, so. Okay, are there any other items that the council members have concerning these recommendations from the staff? All right, so with the amendments as noted by Councilman Lissay or approved by the council, we're now going to vote on the original motion. Oh, Councilmember Shepherd, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So we're talking about a lot more than just fences in this agenda bill. And I'm curious, we have a lot of code that we are changing, but we didn't get a red line. And I'm just curious why.
believe the red line should have been included in the packet. I will look really quick. If you'll bear with me, my apologies.
If I may offer, the red line is included in the packet. It's under the 2020 Code Amendments Council exhibit.
Yeah, this exhibit here has a short description of the proposed change. It has in italics the reasoning behind the change, and then you'll see here this is in this case it came through blue because of how track changes in Word decided to color it this time, but this is the complete underline strike through version.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right. All right, again, if there's no other questions or comments, then we'll go to a vote on the original motion, which includes the amendment. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mark and Jason, and thank you, Councilman Lasay, for your work as well. Councilman Ross, Councilman Shepherd, I think you've left your hand up. Councilman Ross, you wanted to do a follow-up motion?
I do. So I make a motion to refer to the Planning Commission an evaluation of fence heights and locations, specifically consideration of fences along street side yards and alleys, and request the Planning Commission to report back to the City Council with recommendations by the end of 2020.
Second.
All right, motion and second as stated by Councilman Ross. Is there any discussion? Yeah. Well, I guess any member of the public would like to comment on this motion. All right, seeing no one raise their hand, is there any discussion, council? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Can I say, Jody, I'll send you the motion.
All right. Now we're moving on to Agenda Bill 20060, ordinance relating to administrative appeals, providing for an administrative appeal under the State Environmental Policy Act, adopting amendments to Chapter 2.14, new sections 17.30.200, 17.50.130, and 19.04.235 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, and providing for severability and an effective date. Again, this was introduced at the end of May and was ready for action tonight. So if you could just read the motion, please.
Motion to adopt ordinance
1235.
Relating to administrative appeals, providing for an administrative appeal of certain decisions under the State Environmental Policy Act, adopting amendments to Chapter 2.14 and the new sections that Mayor Larson just mentioned of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, and providing for severability and an effective date.
Do I have a second, Council?
Second.
Okay, motion and second is stated by Councilman Ross to approve ordinance 1235. It's very cleverly stated by Councilman Ross, I should say.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this item prior to council action? Seeing no one raised their hand. Any discussion and comments, council?
Nope.
Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion is carried.
3 in a row.
Yeah, we're rolling. All right, so moving on to Parks and Public Works Committee, Agenda Bill 20062, Resolution 1541, determining the lowest responsive bidder and awarding a public works contract to and authorizing execution of a contract with Pacific Civil and Infrastructure Incorporated for the Snoqualmie Railroad Place, Newton, and Delta Street Utility Improvement Project.
Move to adopt resolution.
I just have Agenda Bill 20062. Oh, I'm sorry, Resolution 1541, so my bad.
1541, determining the lowest responsive bidder and awarding a public works contract to and authorizing execution of a contract with the Pacific Civil and Infrastructure, Inc. for the Snoqualmie Railroad Place, Newton, and Delta Street Utility Improvements Project, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have motion and second to approve Agenda Bill 20062 as stated by Councilmember Sunwall. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to council discussion and action? Seeing no one raise their hand, any discussion, council? Turn it to the chair first. Councilmember Sunwall, go ahead.
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way to just think about this is we've talked about this for some time, quite a while actually. But those things outlined in the map are the projects that we need to get done. Time to take it to bid. So really all I had to say.
All right, any further discussion, council? Councilmember Shepherd.
Is this something that we need to do in order to spend our bond money within the 2 years that we're allotted to spend the bond money?
Brian or Robert, perhaps, if you could address that. And then I have Councilmembers Lassay and Mayhew afterwards.
Yes, this project was on the bond anticipation note list of projects to do.
All right, thank you, Brian. Councilmember Lassay, then Mayhew, and then Ross.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct the Honorable Councilmember Sunwall that this is not to bid. This is actually to award a contract.
All right. Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify there. I've heard this misconception before. There is no requirement that the bond proceeds be spent within 2 years. The requirement is at the time that we went out with the bond, we had to reasonably expect that we would use it within 2 years. So I just think it's important that we are clear on what that requirement is, because I have heard it misstated a number of times.
Councilmember Ross.
When we first started talking about this in January, I brought it up, and I just want to remind our Parks and Public Works group, I'd like to see you have an open house for the residents that are located on or near those streets, so they can come in and kind of talk about the project, what the timeline is, and answer any questions.
I think that's reasonable. Obviously, it may not be, depending on timing, it may not be in person. But I don't know how staff feels about that. I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, well, that was my reaction. I think it's something we would have to consider setting up on a Zoom meeting, unless it was practical to open City Hall to do that. But I think it's probably possible to set up a Zoom meeting to do that and advertise it.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you still have a question, leave your hand up. Otherwise, if you could put it down. Councilmember Shepherd, did you have another question?
Yes. So is it, if we aren't required to spend this within 2 years, what is the reason that we're doing it now? I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity to save money by putting this off into the future.
I think actually the timing is quite good for the city to do this project now. From a escalation cost standpoint, we feel these bids are very competitive. This is a utility project. It is an enterprise fund, not as much. It's rate-based funded from the utility, so it's not impacting the general fund, which is more impacted by the COVID situation. It won't save us money to delay this project out in the future. The costs are only going to escalate. They might, follow the economy a little bit here, but trends show that costs are going up over time.
And on utilities, I just wanted to add, we want to make sure that we're following our spending plan. I mean, we did outline a spending plan. This is part of the original bond anticipation note, even ahead of the bond, part of the listing of projects. So we want to follow that plan so we don't have problems or backups in the future. And to Brian's point, if we waited on this, it's going to get more costly. So we're going to have to factor in inflation if we set it off, for example.
Councilmember Sunwall.
Yeah, Brian, can you remind me when shovel will go in ground and when we expect completion?
Yeah, so we're looking at construction to start sometime in July, and construction should be done by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think shovel-ready, fully funded infrastructure projects like this are exactly what the economy needs. And we sure know that these projects have been needed, are long overdue where they're being done. I think it's fantastic that we're moving forward with this for the community, particularly those that live on those streets, and for the economy generally. I think it's fantastic that this is moving forward and that it's already fully funded and ready to go.
Councilmember Sunwall, did you have another question or did you just leave your hand up? All right. Okay, any further discussions or questions, council, on this item? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Brian, I told you we should have put that in consent.
064 there.
Any other reports from Public Works Committee, Councilor Sunwall?
The only report I would add is that we are on track and on schedule for the 3 pedestrian lights at King, Newton, and midsection. So still on track to have those in before the rainy season at the end of this year.
Great, thank you. Community Development Committee report.
No more report.
Finance Administration Committee, if we could pop back up to the consent agenda quickly.
Mayor, you may want to take 064 first.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, Agenda Bill 20064, Employment Agreement for Snoqualmie City Administrator.
Should I read the summary statement as well as the motion?
Yes, it's a resolution, so it hasn't been read in yet.
Great, thank you. By separate agenda item, the mayor seeks confirmation of his appointment of Rick Rudimetkin to the position of city administrator. On January 27th, 2020, the council had previously confirmed Mr. Rudimetkin as interim city administrator, effective through June 30th, 2020. If approved by the city council, Mr. Rudimetkin's employment as city administrator will be governed by the terms of an employment agreement for Snoqualmie City Administrator. Move to approve an employment agreement for Snoqualmie City Administrator between the city and Rick Rudimetkin and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
We might need the city attorney to weigh in on this, but you called for a vote upon the announcement of offering this position. And I want to know if that I guess I need to know if that, I'm asking for that clarification, if that vote supersedes any discussion of this agenda bill.
No, it's a great question. It's one we did discuss internally in terms of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Our conclusion was that the council can confirm, but then if the terms of an agreement you cannot come to terms on, falls apart by virtue of that if the two parties can't agree. So I'll kick it to Bob Surbank if he wants to add anything to that.
Well, that's essentially it, Mayor, that this item is not the appointment. That appointment's been confirmed. So this written agreement would govern the terms of the employment. If there's no approval of the agreement, then it would be either subject to just employment without an agreement, as many other employees are, or subject to whatever other agreement that the council might approve or that might be negotiated by the mayor and Mr. Rudimetkin. So these are independent. Mayor correctly observed we did have some discussion at the committee level as to which come first, the contract or the appointment. I think we had set it up to do so the appointment would come first and the agreement would follow, since you wouldn't want to approve an agreement if you weren't already going to have confirm the mayor's appointment of the person.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out a way to do both simultaneously. So. Okay. With that, any further discussion, council? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, council. And again, a more hearty congratulations, Rick, now that both those pieces are in place. I think I speak on behalf of the council when we say we look forward to working with you and having things settle into a new normal here. We're just enjoy that you came into a very stable, calm period of the city's history here. I can't imagine a strange situation to come into with everything that's going on.
Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you all as well. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Great. All right. So again, back to the consent agenda. Approval of warrants is stated in the agenda packet. Well, let's just take the warrants first, or Councilmember Mayhew, if you want to make a motion.
Yes, move to approve payment of claims and payroll as presented in the finance director's report. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second is stated by the Councilmember Mayhew to approve the warrants. Any discussion, council? All right, go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew, go ahead, and then I'll go from there.
All right. The F&A committee performed the detailed review of claims and warrants as specified in council's procedures during the pandemic emergency. No council member has provided any warrant or claim question to the F&A committee that has not been answered. Move to call the question.
Second.
A motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
Okay, it sounds like it clearly approved by a supermajority. So the question has been called. Now we're back to the original motion with no further debate. All those in favor of approving the warrants?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes. Councilmember Mayhew, if you could, or moving on to Agenda Bill 20063, approval of a consultant services agreement with Financial Consulting Solutions, FCS Group for the utility rate study and general facilities charge update for water, sewer, and stormwater.
On March 23rd, 2020, the City of Snoqualmie Council authorized staff to issue a request for proposal for a utility rate study and general facilities charges update for the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. The intent of this agenda bill is to approve an agreement with FCS Group to conduct the study and update. There is no utility rate adjustment currently scheduled for 2021. The study will help to establish and plan the rates necessary to maintain and carry out water, sewer, and stormwater operations, as well as support the repair, replacement, and improvement of capital assets. Move to approve a consultant services agreement with FCS Group to conduct the utility rate study and general facilities charges update. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 20063 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. I see I'll open it to members of the public to comment on items before council discussion. I see Richard Scheel has got his hand up. If we could unmute Mr. Scheel and allow him 2 minutes to speak, please. And if I could ask one of the staff to put a phone up. I'm not sure if Mr. Scheel will confirm if he can see it or not. Okay. Richard, can you see the timer that Rick Rudimekin is holding up?
No, I don't see it.
Can you scroll through the videos on the right side of your screen? There's kind of a scroll up or down on the above or below the videos.
Okay, I can see it now.
There you go. Okay, so he'll start the clock and then you got your 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So Richard Scheel, 6701 West Crestview Loop, Southeast. I would like to ask that as this project to analyze the rates for the water and sewer and stormwater, that I've seen a lot of frustration on the part of the public with the fact that their amount of their bill is so heavily the base rate and very little on consumption, and they feel that there's little that they can do by conserving to reduce their bill. And I think it's also advantageous to the city if we can encourage conservation. But right now, the billing structure gives very little incentive to people to conserve. So I would like to ask that as part of this rate study, that among the options to be considered, there would be a rate structure that puts a lot less emphasis on base rate and more on the consumption portion, which would then give incentive to people to conserve water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shield. Okay, is there anyone else? I see there's another 425 number on there. I see their hand up though. So with that, I'll bring it back to council and turn it over to the chair of FNA to speak first. Councilor Mayhew.
This study is needed to support any decision on rates and meet any decision on rates and know how they will meet that decision would meet capital and operation needs, whether to keep those rates flat, whether to raise them. It's the needed analysis to quantify the impact of any decision on rates and including how to allocate rates between fixed and variable. As it stands now, this council has not acted on rates beyond 2020. So our future rate schedule doesn't extend beyond this year. We're out of time. We cannot defer this further. We need this study done so that we can make decisions regarding rates for starting for next year, including potentially a decision to hold them flat. So I move to call the question.
Question's been called. Do I have a second, council?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second to call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed, say nay.
No.
No.
Okay, and my count is a 5-2 vote, which is a supermajority, which would call the question. Is there any objection to that? Do I need to do a roll call, or was it Councilmember Holloway? You're muted.
I believe that was a 5-3 vote. Or 4-3 vote, sorry, math.
Oh, okay, were you a nay?
I was a nay.
Okay, I didn't hear you because you were muted. Okay, so with a 4-3 vote, the motion fails then. So we're back to the original motion to be discussed and debated. Councilmember Shepherd, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the concerns I have is that we have a lot of people who are on unemployment and they're struggling in order to be able to pay their water bills. And I know that while we are temporarily saying you don't have to pay your water bill, but they will have to pay it eventually. And the rates are very high for some people. They're really struggling to pay their bills. I feel that we need to work very hard to not increase our water rates. And I think that we need to really sharpen our pencils.
I just would clarify, Councilmember Shepherd, that the water rate study doesn't presume whether the rates go up or down or stay the same. It's a rate study to determine if you have the capacity to keep them the same or even reduce them or raise them. So no presumptions are made at this time. Councilmember Mayhew.
I would just add that for exactly the reason that was just stated by my fellow council member, any decision regarding rates needs a rate study so that we can understand how our decision would impact capital and operating needs. So for the very reason that if a council member is in favor of a particular rate outcome, holding them flat, whatever that desired outcome might be, the rate study is needed to get us there. So I would say that that's a desire to see the rates held steady, or a desire to see a change in how we allocate between fixed or variable usage rates. All of that requires a rate study, and so we should be in favor of having the rate study done to allow us to consider that.
All right, Councilmember Sunwall, your hand's been kind of going on and off. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna not, that's why I put my hand down. But we can't do this blind. We have to make informed decisions. We have to base it on science. We have to base it on data. And sometimes I feel like there's a greater call for traffic studies around here than there are for utility rate studies. And we have to have this data to know what to responsibly do, not because some number of citizens say they're paying too much or too little. We have to know, and this is the only way to know.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Oh, I watched another city go through their process of rate studies, and one of the components of going through that process was to consider what the hardship is for people who have to pay the bill. And I don't feel that our city does that. And I would like us to make that as important a thing to study as what things will cost. And I don't see us doing that.
I think Councilmember Holloway might speak to what I was going to say. Councilmember Holloway.
So at least I wanted to hear why we wanted to drive blind. I've now heard that, and I still don't want to drive blind. So I call the question. May I have a second?
Second.
All right. Question's been called and seconded. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
Aye.
Bob Jeans, was yours a yes or a no?
No.
You do not want to call the question. Okay, so the calling the question still is approved on a 5-2 vote. I heard 2 yeas and 5 yeses. All right, so it's been approved. So we're back to the original motion with no further debate. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. All right, thank you, council. With that, we will move on.
No further report.
All right. Oh, okay, thank you. Hang on, I gotta get back down to where I was here. Public Safety Committee report.
With all the public turmoil all over the country and people pointing fingers at the police departments around the country, some citizens have written to us in emails, and some have suggested taking some drastic steps relative to the police department. And so at next Monday's public safety meeting, we will hear from the chief relative to that point. And I will invite the public. I think I'll send invitations to those individuals who have written to us, and I will invite them to make public comment, particularly interested in whether they're connected to the city of Snoqualmie and whether they have personal experiences with the police department, positive or negative, and that will be an opportunity for the public to be heard.
Okay.
No further report.
All right, thank you. Moving on to committee of the whole then. Councilor Mayhew, you wanted to address some committee liaison assignments or assignment.
Yes. So what I would say tonight is there was an issue that came up. I've looked into it as the mayor pro tem and in the role of being responsible for suggesting or making proposing assignments to committees and liaison roles and so on. All I would say at this point is I would just remind all of the council members that in all of our assigned roles, except for council committee assignments, all liaison roles, etc., that we should not vote or express opinions in those roles that unless the council has authorized that, and that we should at all times be seeking to represent the view of the majority of the council, regardless of our personal views. In those roles, we represent the council, not ourselves individually. And so I would just remind us all of that. And that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
All right. Shepard, you've had your hand up for a bit. Did you forget to leave it up, or did you have a point of order question or something?
No, sorry.
COVID-19 update. I think some of the council members had a question that I would toss to.
Oh, I do have a question.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if we know what the status of the water plan is.
The water plan. I'm not sure if I'm understanding what water plan you're speaking of.
The city's water system plan that we have been working on. I'm just curious what the status is.
Point of order.
Councilor Mayhew, go ahead.
Are we on the agenda?
Yeah, I'll allow it for this reason. I'll back up a little bit. You notice that the new format we have, the staff reports are written at the first meeting of every month. With the new format, they're now embedded in kind of that newsletter format under the mayor's report on your agenda. So I failed to stop there first and say, although the reports are written, are there any further questions from the staff at this time? So under that item, I will allow the question from Councilmember Shepherd as being on the agenda. Brian Kraus, did you want to address that question, please?
Yeah, we're getting very close to having a water system plan draft ready. We should see an initial draft version of that in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks.
And if with you're done with the question, if you could put your hand down, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right. COVID-19 update. I was going to kick that to Mark Carrera or Nicole Wiebe or others to address the updates on the funding, or Councilor May or others that have been partaking in some of those discussions with the chamber and so forth, and the development of the criteria and then getting that out. It went out last week. I think today was the deadline on submitting for those. So maybe a quick update on the $410,000 in Corona relief funds that we were getting out there. So I'm pleased that the staff and others and the liaisons have moved along quickly to get that work done. Mark Carrera, are you online to maybe speak to that real quickly, or?
Yep, I am here, Mayor. So they opened up the, we began advertising, they opened up the application process last week for that program. And today was the deadline at 5. So later this week, we'll be looking at those. Nicole Wiebe is liaison with the chamber and she's working with them on the first step, which would be inclusion or non-inclusion. Basically, did they meet the minimum requirements or not? And then the next phase will be moved on to an internal group with the city. So it did close this afternoon. We're certainly looking forward to getting those dollars out. And I know I've heard a lot of good things from the chamber about a lot of citizens are really, or a lot of the business owners are really happy that that the city's made those funds available to them and the nonprofits.
I hate to interrupt, but there's an Kevin's just got to be aware that God and country can see whatever he's writing, and I don't think that's intended. So maybe stop sharing your screen, Kevin. I just wouldn't want anybody to be embarrassed or have privacy violated by what you're saying.
Thank you, Councilmember Sumwell. Councilmember Ross, did you have a question or comment?
You're muted, Kevin.
Councilmember Ross.
Thank you. Regarding the applicants, can they have received like the PPP funding and other types of grants during this time, or are they or not in order to get the CARES funding?
That is a question on the application. It specifically asks whether or not they've received funding, and that will be considered when they do the ranking.
All right. Councilmember Sumwell.
Do we have an idea yet? I know that they just closed, it just closed a few hours ago. Do we have a sense if we have more applicants than money, or do we not have any idea at this point?
That would be a better question for Nicole. I don't have that information.
Sure. It might be a little too early for that or to know that yet. It's just like, again, it was just closed late this evening.
Well, the reason I ask is because if we're short, it would be nice to reopen it until the money's gone.
Ah, right. Yeah, that would be a good problem to have. All right, and then I wanted to open it to, or ask the police chief to perhaps speak about, some of the events of the past week or so, and just from his perspective, how they've gone. I just wanted to mention how impressed I was with the young, we have a young Mount Si High School graduate this year, 18 years old, Salma Habashi, who was the principal individual that organized the peaceful protest out in North Bend. I was so impressed with her because she just didn't she just stuck to a very course of a vision she had for that event with her friends of just having a peaceful one focused on a very positive message. There were on Facebook and others a number of sort of criticisms coming from both sides and fears and all sorts of other brouhaha, but she conducted herself more maturely than most adults in that she just sort of kept to her message and had no qualms about reaching out to our police department, working very closely with Chief Phipps and his crew. And I think, you know, and working with me and the mayor of North Bend. And I think that group did a phenomenal job. Of course, I think our department did a phenomenal job setting it up in a way that, you know, again, interacted with the crowd in a very respectful manner, supporting the event, but making sure that those with ill intent did not upend it. And I think it was something that the Valley could be proud of. Estimates were there were close to 400 or 500 people there. And Chief, I spoke longer than I intended to, probably still thunder, but if you
said everything for me. Thanks.
if you maybe add to that.
I guess I could just add that, yes, I'll just say that event in North Bend did go very well. We had some concerns early on, you know, that generated a lot of anxiety throughout the town. But overall, it was actually very, very well organized by these three young ladies. It was amazing to watch three 18-year-olds, if you will, to coordinate a bunch of adults on a high emotion issue. And they didn't just coordinate it at the start. They actually did it throughout the event, went up and down and made sure people were complying with what our recommendation and what we wanted to make it a peaceful event. And we had no issues as far as police related, no arrests. And I think there was probably more than 400 or 500. I'm not sure how many, but some people said maybe closer to 1,000 over the whole event. And I would say there was probably over the whole event with people coming and going, it was probably more of towards 1,000 people overall. But it was actually a very nice opportunity for those that wanted to, you know, express themselves and exercise their First Amendment rights. It was a good event.
Yeah, again, those young women did a great job going down, touching base with all the store owners, and just again handled everything very diplomatically. It was just really impressive to the maturity of that group. So I just wanted to and again impressed that they were not vilifying our police department, but in fact embracing and working closely with them to help to reach out and ask for their assistance to help make a successful and safe event for our community. And so again, big shout out to to you, Chief Phipps, and your crew, and to those young ladies and the whole group that organized that. Yeah, they were reaching out to merchants that were coming to participate and support the event too. Chief Phipps, I think the council might be curious though. You did. I mean, we were strategically talking about the fact that these groups that have been disrupting with the intent to cause violence, looting, have been very strategic around different communities. And so one of our concerns was, while the attention was on North Bend, they might target retail areas in Snoqualmie or do some other distractions to move attentions and whatnot. And you anticipated that, of course, but then reached out to other agencies. Did we incur, or did North Bend incur any extraordinary costs in those resources that we reached out to connected with them?
No, we actually had better response for our request for mutual aid because there was quite a few communities that were having events that day. I actually had Kittitas County, they came here and assisted with handling calls for service in Snoqualmie and in North Bend, while a majority of our officers were dealing with the event. We also had outside like Pacific, Algona, Mercer Island, also assisted in this event. So we had others too. A total of, I believe, 29 officers were available to respond if there was needed, but there was no issues that we were prepared for. We, like you said, Mayor, there's been a kind of a tactic, if you will, where they'll go away from where all the demonstration and protests are, and they'll go to a place that they don't believe any police, because the resources are thin, will be at. And we were actually prepared for that, and also other places in North Bend, and we did not have any issues or anything like that would cause us concern throughout the day. Actually, there was nothing that happened in Snoqualmie had some posters in the morning that they put all over the community, but that's all it was, and that was really not a big deal.
Yeah, and of course, all of you, I'm sure, heard of the vandalism that occurred with the restrooms.
Yeah, and that was, last week. I was actually working from 7 to midnight every day last week, trying to make sure that we had high visibility along the corridors, making sure that we, when somebody was coming into the town, that they saw a patrol unit. And we also had people stationed at Center Street, Railroad Avenue, and then in North Bend at the Outlet Mall to make sure that those high potential areas were covered by us. While doing that, of course, there's areas in the neighborhood that we didn't have the resources to continue to patrol in the neighborhood. We had the same amount of patrol officers, but we were really focusing on the corridors in and out of this community to make sure we didn't have any problem of people coming in. And so we did get hit by three of our parks were hit pretty severely, but as great as this community is, we had sufficient people that came out and literally cleaned it before we could get paint and so forth. But that was really the only thing that we dealt with, and that was Tuesday night, I believe it was, that happened. And it had to have happened after midnight, and it was all actually, it's going to be local kids that did that. It wasn't anybody from outside. They hit Carmichael Park, and that is kind of tucked in. If you don't know this community, you're not going to go to Carmichael Park and hit that. And I know they didn't hit Community Park because I was there till midnight sitting in the parking lot. So they got it after.
Yeah, it was, but it was, as much as it created a bit of brouhaha, it was very inspiring and heartwarming to see the immediate community outpouring of folks. I made a point to go out to the parks and at least try to say hi to some of those folks and thank them for their, but I was in a couple of meetings, and by the time I finally had my head up and was reaching out to the staff to say, hey, let's get out there and clean it up, there was already pictures showing that a bunch of residents already took care of it. It was already cleaned up. So it was phenomenal how quickly they jumped on it.
Yeah.
Very good. So I'm pretty proud overall how the community's responded so far to the challenging events of late. Councilor Shepherd, did you have some questions or comments?
I was just curious if we have any clue on who did the tagging around the restroom.
Our detectives are looking at, we're requesting or asking for any video. We've gone door to door. We've tried. I don't know if they made contact with every resident to see if they have any video that may have captured somebody in that area. We're still working on it. We've had other issues that we've had to deal with while working on that. So, but that is still a high priority.
All I would say is, given the conduct of the kids that helped organize the protest, I'm not going to assume it was kids that did the restroom. It could very well have been some local adults that were pretty
so true.
Enthusiastic. Councilmember Sunwell.
Yeah, it was one of the thoughts that came to my mind. It was down the list, but I know down in the what's the name of it? The park down by my office, just down there in downtown on the river. We do have a camera there. I wasn't really aware until this happened that we don't have cameras in our parks, and I'm just curious, has that been a conscious decision? Is that just we don't want to be one of those communities that has cameras everywhere, or it's just no one's really ever given serious thought about it?
No, I mean, it's been in the discussion. It's a decision that can be made. I mean, when you're putting cameras into a park, you have to be careful what the purpose is. I actually talked to one of our employees here today to research on a camera. The current camera we have is not very high quality. And I think we do have a need for a camera. We could surely utilize it at the skate park when we have issues at the skate park at night. And we can surely use it for some of these issues, say, put up a park at night like this graffiti issue. But so we're looking into it again. I brought it up about 2-3 years ago, and it was just decided not to have them at that time. But it's nice to have one camera or two cameras that you can move around. That's flexible. You can use it for when you have a need. We have a couple needs that I can't really get into, but we're in an investigation right now that's associated with the what's going on around our nation in our own community, and a camera in that case would really help quite a bit.
Councilor Sunwell.
One other thought, and again, this is something just maybe we can talk about this in our public safety committee meeting. I'm curious, again, I've only been doing this a few years now, and I don't recall the conversation coming up, but I don't believe we wear body cams. Has there been a conversation about doing that? I'd be curious as to what your thoughts are on it. Obviously, there's a cost associated with it. Just curious.
Yes, I did bring that up when I came here. I also brought up in-car cameras for that as well. There's positive and negative. To be honest with you, most police officers want that camera because it really is a protection for us. And it doesn't change the behavior a whole lot, they found, but it is really something that helps in the officer's comfort as far as being falsely accused of anything. And it really, if there's an issue that the officer did something wrong, then there's some accountability there as well, which is good. It is cost prohibitive at times. Just the storage of it, depending on how many people have body cameras, the storage alone is quite expensive. And then you also have the issue of your public records. So that those videos are evidence. So on every case, you have to attach it to the case, has to go down the prosecutor. So essentially, it's a new employee because they're spending all their time on going through the video, redacting whatever needs to be redacted, if anything at all, and then also PR, public record stuff that we have to send out as well. I'll just go by my experience. We hired two full-time employees where I came from just for the body cameras.
Councilmember Shepherd, you've had your hand up. I don't know if you forgot it or if you had a question.
I have a question. Neighborhood watch. I haven't seen signs. I don't know if we do that here, but I know that we have, when you have an event like the protest, there's just too many things going on all at once that you cannot possibly have police officer everywhere every minute. And I think that the community could certainly participate as far as keeping an eye out on what's going on. And we all have cell phones. So I don't know how much it would take to get, if it exists. I'm sorry, I don't even know if we have it or not. But I'm just wondering if that might be something that we could look at.
No, that is one thing that I was going to task to the admin sergeant if I ever got that, because that takes an officer to oversee that or somebody to oversee it. You have to have block captains, keep in contact with the block captains. The block captain kind of, because you don't have just neighborhood watch isn't the whole community. It's what it says. It's a small neighborhood, a couple blocks maybe that is one, and they have to have a block captain, kind of the person that keeps everybody informed what's going on, and it's our go-to person. And that fits in with National Night Out. So when we have National Night Out, we would actually go to the different block areas and we would meet with the block captain and the residents that are part of that neighborhood watch. It's something that we surely could do. It can be initially labor intensive to put it all together, to keep it going, but it does take somebody to focus on it. And I just don't really have that personnel right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a number of folks reaching out to me on one extreme saying, hey, just give us the go, Mayor. We're ready to come out packing this to protect our neighborhoods.
No.
And then on the other extreme saying, hey, yeah, that was vandalism and not appropriate, but you have to understand there's a message behind it. Maybe we had to leave it there. So it was kind of some wide opinions on both sides of that spectrum. But that's why I appreciate how the chief and our officers have to kind of negotiate those tricky issues. Chief, I know out in North Bend, there were a few that, and what we did do, Councilmember Shepherd, is I did at least encourage some of those folks to say, yeah, hey, we don't have enough eyes on things. If you certainly see suspicious activity and things going on in your neighborhoods around the parks, we would appreciate a call in. I couldn't just tell people to not do nothing short of a neighborhood watch program. But I did encourage them to leave their guns at home and we didn't want to create a vigilante situation. But Chief, maybe you could speak to it, because I know there were some reports of some folks that were, again, showing up to protect the businesses in North Bend, and I think you guys dealt with them very diplomatically as well.
Yeah, no, it was just a group of guys that, local North Bend residents that were concerned about protecting their community. They were seeing and hearing and had the belief that maybe some people were going to come in from the outside, and there was a possibility of that. They were going to come in from the outside and cause problems, and they weren't going to allow that to happen. So we did have to spend quite a bit of time on the day before, Friday, having meetings and talking with them, and they were level-headed. They weren't, they understood, but they also understood that they had, some rights to be able to carry a firearm. We kind of agreed that they could do what they did and not actually, be too much. I mean, there was a big call for kind of being more of vigilantism, I guess, but they actually did very, very well. In a way, they kind of were there to make sure the peace was going to happen, and they may have helped with that, although they didn't have guns, long guns or anything like that was out visible that I saw. I never saw anybody like that. I had a report somebody was on the roof, and it was a business owner, but he didn't have a long gun that I saw, and we were also on the roof, so we kept an eye on him.
Yeah, there were some that wanted to go up on the roofs initially with guns, I think, and our officers or Chief Phipps diplomatically talked them off that. The risks or the threats were real. I mean, down in Covington, I don't know if the rest of the council heard, there was it's one of the more scary situations I've heard of where a very similar situation in North Bend happened. Some of the local residents, that a few that had guns, were protecting their stores. And then a group of 30 individuals looking to create mayhem and violence and looting showed up, poured out of a U-Haul truck, and then confronted the other folks at the stores. It got a little tense for a while. A couple gunshots were fired, but fortunately it didn't escalate any further and dissipated, but it got pretty dicey for a while. So those were the exact sort of things that we were a bit concerned about. And again, big kudos to Chief Phipps, anticipating those issues and making sure to touch base with those elements and have conversations and, keep any of that from escalating or getting out of hand. So great job. Thank you, Chief Phipps.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd, you had your hand up again, or did you?
Yes. Are we allowed to fire a gun in the city limits?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so council, I want to be mindful and respectful of time. We're coming up on 9 o'clock here, unless there's any further questions or issues about that. Chief Phipps, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, the staff reports are included in the packet. Last one, and I probably shouldn't let this off to the end unless she's been, Councilmember Ross, did you have a quick question or comment?
I do. Have you heard anything from the governor? I know the Snoqualmie Valley Governments Association mayors sent a letter to the governor to see if we can open earlier for phase 2.
Yeah, I had a chance to speak to the governor. Well, there were 14 or so of us mayors on the phone with him. We submitted our questions in advance. Mine was the first up, and it was to that point. His comment was, or his answer was consistent with what the executive told me. I talked to Dale Constantine, and Dale said he's very much in favor of that, and had pushed the issue with the governor. But the answer that he got, and both he and I got, was that he wasn't quite comfortable going there, although they were entertaining maybe looking at things on a zip code basis or city by city basis. They simply didn't have the administrative resources to deal with that. Of course, we've been kind of pushing the notion, well, of course you don't have the administrative resources. That's why you should probably give a little more latitude to the individual mayors or communities. I didn't give that response, of course, but was pleased that at least subsequent to that conversation, there was some movement to at least allow for a 1.5, if not the 2. So I think some of those conversations and that bit of a push did result in some movement anyway, rather than again going on for one more month with no change. So thank you. All right, with that, other than to maybe have her exposed to the entire typical council meeting, I don't know if our new human resources analyst is still here. Deborah, is Amanda Bossard hanging around still in the meeting?
No, she is not.
Okay, was she here earlier?
No, she's been having internet problems, and I think it's Comcast needs to come out and fix it. She had to use her personal phone today to talk to me.
All right, so the good news is we didn't torture her to wait through an entire meeting.
No.
All right, very good. All right, council, I think that's all we have. I don't know if there's any other announcements. I think on the 19th, we're very enthusiastically supporting a parade for the 2020 class coming up here soon. So hopefully you can come out and help support that in some fashion. And then at the high school's doing it. And then we are actually committing to doing a parade we've kind of taken it from the ROA, 4th of July parade that we figure will be kind of celebrating all our first responders and human service agencies to keep the parade relatively small but big enough to sort of be fun. So, be a way that the community can acknowledge and thank all the folks that have been serving the community, churches and human service agencies across the valley and hospital first responders and so forth, to have them come out on that day. I think that would be great for the community. I can't think of anything else immediate for announcements unless any of the staff could remind me of something I'm missing or council members.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
I just wanted to circle back and make one comment, make sure that council members are aware something that was raised during the utility rate study conversation, and that is if people are suffering from unemployment, and we do have a low income rate discount available that's already authorized in the city code for utility customers. And so if constituents are reaching out to council members about difficulty paying utility bills, they may want to be aware of that process, and they can inquire through the utility department or through Finance Director Robert Hammoud as to how to go about seeking approval for that, for the low income discount.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. That's a great point. I'm aware of at least one individual that came to my attention where they were really desperate, and both had lost their jobs. And when we pointed out that they could apply for that, he was very relieved and then pursued that, I think, immediately. So that's important to let folks know that those options are available.
Yeah, if I could make a point, this is Robert. If you go to our website, there's the number for the utility billing hours, and Tammy Wood will answer. It's Monday through Thursday, 8 to 12. The phone number's on the website, and if anybody wants more information about a low-income assistance and trouble paying the bills, please give her a call and we'll work with them the best we can. Thank you.
All right. With that, I don't have anything else for any announcements. There being no further business coming before the council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Enjoy the rest of your evening. You ended right at 9 o'clock. So thank you all. Have a good evening.